Is this on?
Do that on an easy day.
Hey, I found out I
Is
played
this
a whole
on?
different one.
No, it's not. I'm
The
not
state
on.
president- we're-
Denise, I'm not on.
First 2.5 hours was training for the state president.
Dance.
Good evening. Welcome to our discussion of our 2014 fiscal year budget. This is the Mayor and City Council Cotton Day event. So we'll turn time over to Roger. We don't need to approve this or anything?
No, there's no
Okay.
action tonight. Well, first of all, thank you, council. I know that this is just a week that you've all partied it up. And so we'll, I think the best way to proceed this evening, this is really your night to kind of go through, I'm sorry, why are you looking at me? Oh, okay, sorry. So I want to just point out a couple things as we get into tonight's discussion, and I hope you've at least had the opportunity to look at both the assumption and policy sheet that was sent out as well as the material you had in backup in case you had any question. A couple of points that I think I'll make is the significant issues with the 2014 budget that I think is at least pertinent to point out to the council is that for the most part we held all the departments to the where feasible to the 2013 operational levels, and then of course we are proposing some change from the discussion we had a couple weeks ago. I mentioned this to you last week, I think, about the 2% across the board versus the other pay structure that we'd recommended a couple of weeks ago. And then there, of course, is a recommendation on a benefit change on the healthcare benefits as well. So those are for sure the significant issues, and so based upon that methodology, what you do have before you is you do have a budget that does have some fund balance remaining. So it isn't a balanced budget, but it will have to be by next week. And I'll talk to you about what your options are with that $92,000 and something, if there's based upon any other changes that the council recommends. So that, I just wanted to kind of start by pointing out the highlights. Very specific questions. I appreciate department heads being here, so very specific questions they might be able to answer on operational issues and those type of things. And then we'll just, from tonight's meeting, we'll get that input and work what we need to work and get this ready for you for next week. So I guess I just throw it out as a free-for-all at this point.
So, I guess I can just start with this, and as I read through it, it looks like we're kind of a sinking ship in that we're borrowing money each year from the fund balance. I'm trying to figure out do we know what the underlying problem is?
I actually dropped another, and actually if we could have, depending on how much time you want to take with the budget tonight, there's two other documents I dropped into your Dropbox. And those to me are more pertinent discussions for the council because it kind of brings us off the budget level into the 30,000 foot level. One of the items, if you want to, and let's just jump there for a minute, let me open that up as well. In your Dropbox, I gave to you, and I'm going to tell you what it's called as soon as I pull it up here. Sales tax per capita. This to me is somewhat telling, and I think goes a little bit to the heart of your question, Councilman Truman. What's happened is what we're seeing is, and I'm talking about, I'm primarily focusing this evening on general fund, because that's always our challenging fund. But in 2006, you can see we had a population of about 19,000 people, and you can see for the most part our sales tax has not changed a whole lot. It's varied a little bit. It's actually gone down a little bit since 2006. I think there at 2010 is when it hit kind of its low point, and then as you can see it's actually come up, and quite frankly we're on task this year to probably just exceed, and Carrie might get correct, to just maybe even exceed our top year since 2006.
So that just following the economy, we took a dive?
We took a dive, but we really didn't take a dive as bad as a lot of cities did, but still we took a dive. But our population continued. And so what happened is, this is significant to me, so where we used to have, and just on the sales tax component, we used to have $183 per capita in 2006, has now dropped to $156. To me, what that says is we're a little out of balance. And that's common. Cities will kind of ebb and flow. Certainly the rooftops that are coming into Washington City will drive development, but the cart hasn't caught up to the horse yet. And that's been a combination of a lot of factors, lack of available capital in the market, consumer confidence, all sorts of things that the private sector would say, well, maybe I'll invest in milepost 13, but not today. I think that's all going to change. You know, we got good growth in Sienna Hills, we got growth in Coral Canyon, we've got great growth on the north side of, on the Green Springs area, but we haven't caught up.
Yeah, the problem with the growth is we may add people, but we still don't, they're going to St. George to buy all their goods, so.
Well, you're exactly right. This is, to me, this is why the second document I dropped, to me, is so crucial, because I really feel that in the next few years, and maybe even the next 10 years, one of the major objectives of this council and staff needs to be a very aggressive commercial sales tax approach. Because property taxes remained at best flat because of property values. Matter of fact, we've seen property values, property tax drop. And the fact of the matter is property tax does not generate a lot for the city anyway. If I take my property tax, I looked at this, my property tax runs about $1,400 a year total. A little under 200 of that goes to Washington City. And the rest goes, you know, to school district, water conservancy in the county, and a myriad of other places. But property tax really doesn't generate it. And quite frankly, we are always hesitant to adjust property tax because you get a lot of pain for very little return, if that makes any sense. You really do. I mean, it's tough on people, and your return on property tax is fairly insignificant. Now, Washington City is fortunate enough to be one of the lowest property taxes in the county. And Washington County happens to be one of the lowest property tax counties in the state. Matter of fact, we're in the lower 30% of the Washington County as far as property tax is concerned. But sales tax is significant to us, and I think to somewhat answer your question, we need to start bringing some balance, because unfortunately residents demand the highest cost, but bring in the least amount of revenue. Commercial business actually brings in the greatest amount of revenue with the least amount of effort, because we don't have to serve, you know, parks and all that is not necessary for them. So we are out of balance. There's no doubt about it.
So the way I see those numbers is we're growing in people and not in businesses.
Correct.
But when I look at growth in people, and I just took your numbers, Roger, and just did real quick calculations. Let's say we had 350 households a year, or new builds a year. So that'd be about an additional $70,000 a year in property taxes. And I just did 350 by 2,000 is how I did that. Excuse me. By 200 or 2,000?
Yeah, 200 is what you're
Okay,
gonna see
so
to the
that's off.
city.
So that's
No.
70,000, okay. And then the other one though is impact fee numbers. What's the impact fee total collection for a new build?
Well,
Is that around 20,000?
yeah, I think that's fair, but again, I can't use any of that for operations.
It's
So that-
for the
yeah.
other funds.
None of that goes to
I'm
operations.
just trying to think of what expands though as we build.
As we
Here's
build
my
out the
reason.
new,
Here's my reason is I'm not convinced we're ever gonna be a commercial superpower. I think one of our great benefits is that we're a place where people want to live.
Mhm.
And part of our future and our reality, I think, is that we gotta learn how to operate within that reality. Which is that, yeah, we'll have some more businesses come and go, but the big business centers, the big commercial centers aren't targeted for our city.
well, and then your objective is, you're gonna have to look at property tax. Because the issue is with population comes a demand for services. So for instance, utilities. We've added 3,000 or 4,000 utility accounts over the last few years. We've added no staff there. At some point, it kind of gets pressured. And I'm not suggesting we were at the right equilibrium before. Maybe we were a little heavy. I'll give you that argument. But as that continues to grow, at some point you're going to say that it's not going to continue to be heavy. We talk about our public safety side of things. You know, you're going to have at some point some officer level as the population grows. So if we can't emphasize the sales tax, you're still going to have a sales tax pressure that occurs because of population growth. If we stopped, I think we could say, you know, this is handleable. If the population continues to grow and there's no alternative revenue coming in, you're going to have to either convince the public that they need to go with a lesser service, meaning you may have a 20-minute response time versus a 10-minute response time, or you're going to have to look at an alternative revenue source.
Or you have to sell the community center and save $1 million a year, put it back in the general fund. you know, I guess that's the balance you have to look at, and the trade-off here, public safety, because I agree, as the population grows, the cost grows disproportionate to the amount of money we bring in from the individuals who come. So we've got to tighten the budget, or we have to find businesses. It seems pretty as simple as that.
See, I would almost disagree with the fact, I think that we have some great growth potential economically. I mean, you got milepost 13 and looking commercial all down your frontage road there. Personally, I see the opportunity for us, and who knows when, but I would see that we become very, very prosperous tax-wise, to the point that you, at one time I looked at it and said, because we are so landlocked, our community can only grow so big. If we could get the right tax base here, I looked that you could actually lower your property taxes, even though it becomes minute really to them.
Yeah.
But,
I hope so.
well, you just look, I mean, there's several big pads you've got around the Maverick. I mean, you've got all of Ed Burgess's properties there, Dean Terry's properties there. There's some properties there that will develop out. It's just,
So for instance, if I could have just
but
held,
on the trajectory we're following, if it takes 10 years, that's not soon enough.
yeah, that's like I say, just went. Yeah.
no, and so for instance, if I could have held my collection per capita at 183, at this current population, that's almost 700,000 additional dollars. Okay, that's significant for our budget, for our general fund budget. That's significant.
Are there any guidelines as to what other cities per capita, what they bring in revenue-wise, or is there like a target or a baseline?
Well, you know, I don't know if there's a target, because so many cities are so different in what the services they offer. As a matter of fact, yesterday I just received from the Utah Taxpayers Association an interesting survey, and I'll scan it and send it to you, because it is actually the most, well, let me phrase this correctly, because it wasn't the most expensive cities in Utah and also the cheapest cities in Utah, but it was which cities, what is the cost of government, what is the highest cost of government in some cities versus others. Salt Lake City was the highest cost of government, and it was something like, I can't remember. Do you remember, Carrie? It was 1,600 of the cities over 20,000. I'm sorry, they broke it into population. St. George was number 2. And then the smallest cost per government cities were things like, Randolph.
Yeah.
You know, cities that were just very, very small, that offer really no services because they have no population. And even the Utah Taxpayers Association said there are so many variables in this. We just offer this as something for you to look at. By the way, Washington City did not hit the top 20 of any of those, either the cheapest or the highest, which was fine with us. Park City, quite frankly, is the most expensive, and they're over $4,000 per capita. But part of the reason they wanted to point out with Park City, and this is to go to answer your question, is why it's so difficult to make apples and apples comparison, is Park City has a higher secondary home, and so they collect more in property tax just because of the secondary home. It's 100% value, cost. And so that's why it's kind of tough. What we look at more, Councilman Staley, is just from year in and year out our own progress with regards to cost.
But it seems like there's got to be a tipping point on population where we have the infrastructure or the fixed costs that are kind of met, and then from that point forward, the cost to provide those service per capita is lower, right?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
at some point, we have all the pieces in place, and then it's just a matter of managing and expanding as needed. But we're kind of in an adolescent age, I would think, as a city, of just under 24,000. I don't think we're quite.
Yeah.
So
With this growth level, what you see when cities grow, we've been probably one of the top 10 cities fastest growing in the state for the past 5 years. And you're going to see a couple characteristics with that, which I actually am proud to say with the first one is not necessarily true, I don't think, but you'll see sometimes a lot of acquisition of debt. Because what they're doing is they have to get those roads in, they have to get those sewer lines in, they have to get those water lines in, and they can't pay for it today.
Yeah.
So they have to spread over time. So you see a lot of debt, and you also see this kind of a crunch, this kind of what I call a horse and cart approach. And then some cities, again, if they're truly bedroom, the one advantage Washington has, we could be a bedroom community in that sales tax is not an option for us.
Well,
But I
our
agree with
neighbors, Ivans
Councilman
and Santa
Turner.
Clara,
What's that?
they don't have big.
That's exactly right.
So,
And
how do
have
they
to
do it?
They have to pick it up with a higher property tax. And
I
their
look at-
growth has not been the same level. You bring an interesting comment, because Kimberly kind of the other day indicated that our motto is to blame. We have become a city of choice. And we've really attracted this big population. What Drew said has said before, we did last month, just so you know, this is not ebbing right now, 71 permits last month. We have not had that high of a single month residential permit since 2006 on any single month, 6 years.
Wow.
And so, but they're requiring not only us to build the infrastructure, which in many cases we can do with impact fees, so that's not a problem, but then maintaining that structure and maintaining a level of service standard. And that level of service standard, unfortunately, still has to do with parks and trails and that as well. That's those balls you have to balance.
See, I would look at our greatest potential actually is gonna come from the hurricane side. As hurricane spreads out, that's what's gonna feed our exit 13s.
Yeah.
Because our people now are going to St. George to shop, the hurricane people will come to, those places will develop for our hurricane people and our local people. But, so that's what, if I was a developer, I would be watching what's happening on the eastern side of our
And
county.
then the south side near the airport. it seems
The
like there's-
airport's gonna be a huge I'd see that as a great tax base for us.
This is not dire. I don't want to paint a dire picture here, because it really isn't. This is what we do every year. I mean, we have to just kind of make the jigsaw puzzle fit every year. But there are some trends that we want to stay in front of, and one of these, to me, a significant component is sales tax, is a trend that
Well,
we need to be
and-
cognizant of.
And back to what Councilman Truman said about the community center, I like the community center, I think we all like the community center, but we see maybe just a little bit house poor. You know, you have a house that's just a little bit of more of a mortgage payment than you want to pay. And between maybe that golf course and that, we're just a little bit house poor. And then trying to keep up services on the other end, it makes for a tight.
Yeah, we're no different. That's a great example. We're no different than a household. You know, sometimes went out and got the car, and you realize maybe you shouldn't have got the car right
Now
now.
you're just trying to pay for it, but at some point,
But you'll ebb and flow.
you get it figured out.
Uh-huh.
See, I think if we're gonna bring in the sales tax revenues, I look at the history since I've been on the council, and I've seen nothing but businesses close.
Mhm.
I look at the town and country, we can't manage to get one to even be open right next to Walmart, and that's just a head scratcher for me, I don't understand it. I know it's not working, and I don't know how much we play into that, but I think that we maybe need to find out other ways, to encourage and incite and invite businesses to come here.
Well, and that's what I did in my other Dropbox thing, is I just got onto a roll one night and started throwing some, and I talked to some others, Aaron and I talked, and some others in the community, or in the staff, and we kind of came up with that, because to answer your question from my perspective, during the economy, during this downtime of the economy, it wouldn't have mattered if I'd have had 5 economic development directors. There was no availability of capital in the market. There was no consumer confidence. And so I could have had people talking all day long about why Washington City was the premier place to be, and no one would have come, because they could have agreed with us, but they would have never been able to have access to capital to be able to do anything. One of the problems Washington has, different than St. George, is St. George already has a lot of infrastructure. I had people call me at times during the downturn of the economy and say, well, I can't get any capital to build a facility, but I need a facility of this size. What do you have in Washington? And my response was, we have nothing. And so that kind of hurt us a little bit there. Now, what I do see changing a little bit is capital is, right or wrong, if you agree with it or don't agree, that capital is flowing more into the economy. We do have a little bit stronger consumer confidence. I think we're seeing our own growth in the Washington County area picking up. Including unemployment was another bad number that hurt everybody from wanting to do anything. And I think now, when the economy does have some ability to chug along, then Washington can do some things that would make a difference. When the engine wasn't even running, it didn't matter what we did, in my opinion. That's why, to me, when we closed down the Economic Development Office, I don't think we were harmed during that time of the economy. As a matter of fact, I think we were helped just because we were able to restrict costs.
I agree on that.
And I don't think we need to change the model right now. What I mean by that is I'm not going to suggest to you right now or in the very near future that we open an office like that back up. I think with the council's commitment, the mayor's commitment, it's his big issue, with my commitment, this just needs to be a high priority. I also know that state institutional trust land, which is always, I've got to throw that one in as a really bit of a challenge for us too, because they're just a different landowner to work with than a private landowner. They don't have the same market forces upon them. But I can tell you right now that I find that state institutional trust land, because of some financial crunches they're having with some obligations that they have made, they're much more in a position to want to cut deals in a better way than they were even 2 years ago. And so I think the environment is improving. It's not perfect for us, but I think it's improving, and that's what I tried to encapsulate a little bit of some of my thoughts in the other memo I dropped to you. I don't know if you read Mayor Becker was interviewed a couple weeks ago, the mayor of Salt Lake City, and he said, we have no more, I don't know how he said it, we have no more rings on our belt. We can't tighten anymore. We're done.
Yeah, no
And
more
so
notches.
every notches, thank you. Every city is in kind of the same thing. We continue to defer capital investment. You know, and one day capital investment all comes home to roost when you defer it. And we know that, but we still got some tools in our toolkit.
Yeah, this is a well thought out letter. As I'm scrolling through it, I mean, there's some.
Is that the economic development?
Yeah,
Yep, even
I
things
certainly see
things that we
this-
have talked about in general seem
Yeah,
to be.
no, I think there's some great value that this council probably does need to flesh out and put something together like that, because I know I happened to be with the mayor when we met with the site selector. Remind me of his name, Mayor. That's
Stuart Thane?
Stuart Thane. And his whole meeting on that first meeting was to see what the palette of the council was towards putting something like this together. Whether the council was willing to work with developers if they would come in, or whether it was like, there it is, we're hard-lined and we're not giving you anything to work with. And I think that was pretty related to it. This council was anxious for economic development and would be probably willing to look at some things there. So I think it would behoove us to move forward on this, something like this.
I'm most excited about that. I think the tax increment finance has great options to us. And, because it incentivizes and we're not laying out anything that we don't already have, or wouldn't already have. So it's on a receipt basis. We receipt the new sales tax collection in, they would receive a percentage for a period of time. It is not us laying out anything up front. And honestly, if nobody takes advantage of it, no one takes
We're
advantage.
not at anything.
We're not out anything.
Well, I think most of, especially your bigger developers anymore, we have trained them that cities do these types of things. And it's kind of like J.C. Penney's new marketing thing that says, we're not gonna have any sales, we're gonna give you a lower price. Everybody quit buying there. And that's exactly what happens. When you have a developer that wants to come in and says, what are you willing to do for me? You better have something to talk to him about, or he's gonna turn and walk away.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I still think Washington has a very bright future. As a matter of fact, the point I was gonna make about a bedroom community, we're not a true bedroom community. The one thing we can at least have hope with is we got an I-15 corridor running through 6 miles of our city. And some of that is not available.
4 miles of which are trailer park.
Well, there's always tools that the council can use for that too. Depending on how aggressive you want to be. But I certainly agree with you. If I was a Santa Clara, I might,
20-minute response time?
if I didn't have a Southern Parkway, and the Southern Parkway is going to be 10, 15 years down the road before you really see anything significant, in my opinion, out there. But the fact of the matter is, if I didn't have those things, I would probably be saying we do have to probably look at other revenue sources. But I have confidence that Washington City's, these rooftops are going to drive development, commercial development. They do, they always have. But it's just we're catching up. We're somewhere in the hitch. So in the meantime, we're weathering it. And that's kind of what this budget is tonight, is our way of weathering 2014.
One thing that, and I realize that these numbers are small in every fund, but they also reoccur in every fund. And I'm just curious, and none of them have giant increases in any one spot, but they all seem to be increasing every year. The use of phones, conferences, travel, dues and memberships, lunches and meals, and bank charges. Are those things that have to grow every year too, just like everything else, or can we come into that? And especially, I'm curious on our policy with phones. How many of our employees that primarily sit at a desk phone all day also have cell phones?
Well, I'd suggest a couple of things. First of all, what we have done initially when the budgets got cut is, let me talk about conference. Conference got slashed significantly
I
to
remember
nothing.
that, I remember
So that's
that.
actually kind of grown back to where we're having to renew certifications. We're doing things like this next year, Springbrook. It doesn't make any sense for me to have a finance system that I do and then not get anybody trained on it. So that became a priority that we need to continue to, and part of our challenge with Springbrook is the fact that we have cut back so much on the side that needed the training on, that it wasn't functioning as well as we wanted to. So conference has actually not even grown to the level it used to be, but we felt like we've had to push that conferences up a little bit. One of the things we've done with phones lately is, do you remember the company that we used to do the utility audit? Utah Cost Management, is that what it was, Steve? Utah Cost Management, and they went in and they said, we're gonna do an audit on all your utilities, and then whatever savings, we get a percentage of, et cetera, et cetera. They just recently did all of our phones, and so what we're doing is we're pooling our minutes, because you do have some departments that use more minutes, and rightfully so, like public works areas and
Yeah,
other
notice
things.
Lester's is
Yeah, Lester's might be a
10
good
times everybody
example.
else's.
You have others that don't, and so they've started to pool those in the buckets, kind of like the family plan types of things, so that they balance out and our costs will decrease with respect to that. I don't know, Steve may be able to answer something more along the phones issue, but.
Do we have a policy about which employees are issued cell phones versus
Oh, we
just the
do, but
desk
usually
phone?
that's left to the department head ultimately is the one will give approval or not approval on phones. Most of our line employees, if they're on call, there's an on-call phone that rotates.
Of course.
Administration, almost all have phones, and that's good because we do communicate back and forth all the time, all
So you
hours.
use them just for texting?
Some will use them for texting, and some not so much for texting, and some will use it more for the phone calls. So it depends on the personnel. And then you ask a couple other questions in there on,
Dues and membership,
yeah, and dues and memberships we cut just to the bare necessity, just what they have to keep certifications going.
okay. Bank charges is one that kept showing up.
Kimberly may be able to address bank charges.
I thought she was supposed to get rid of bank charges.
We like that.
There were some departments that had never had bank charges, but now do.
Because they're being allocated properly.
One of two things. Any department that's involved with bonds, they have annual trustee fees that are associated with the management of those bonds for our trust agent, and those fall under the bank charges. So you'd see those in any division that's associated with those bond debts. The other thing you see in bank charges would be the merchant service fees for credit card processing. So court is one where you haven't seen those charges before because utilities used to absorb it all because we were all on one merchant. But now that we have the Chorus system, they have all of their credit card charges on a separate statement. We know what share is theirs, and they pay for that out of their budget now.
So Chorus allows you to break that out.
Because, well, they have a different merchant provider that's
It's like
mandatory.
merchant services more than, we're not paying fees, or we're just paying fees to process the transactions,
There
right?
would
Merchant
be-
fees.
No, I mean, it would include merchant fees, per transaction fees, it's credit card processing.
But we're not paying like interest on those.
No,
We-
what you're saying is we're accruing a
Some
lot
of
of
the
bank
fees are a
charges.
percentage of the overall transaction, if that's what you mean.
Yes, like
in
that's the
merchant.
merchant charges,
Yeah.
but not.
Yeah, but what, if you're thinking that we're just paying a lot of bank charges because of the way we're handling the funds and that is, it's mostly merchant.
No, it's merchant. If there's usually any like late payments for things like that, most of those we actually slot into the finance one. I think it's a budget of around $1,000 or something, is where we stick those.
Here's my, this year, we had, added, we have bank charges in judicial of 10,000.
Yes.
But I don't see anywhere that a 10,000 came out of anyone else's bank charges. So did we just never budget it before, or, that's my concern.
Well, it is hitting their budget now, and I guess the difference to that would just be overall, let's say the growth
Okay,
that we've had in utility billing for the activity. But basically, before, you only saw merchant services in. The community center had theirs on their own
Yeah.
statement, the golf course had theirs on their own statement, and then
right,
anything that was processed in this building, so anybody paying for any service with a credit card in this main office,
right,
those hit the utility billing
right.
processing. So
One
whether
of
they're
the-
paying for a building permit, whether they're paying for, any cash receipting, it hits utility billing if they pay for it in this building.
And I would suggest that we have had a lot of growth because of our efforts to put people on online bill pay, auto pay and all that. And we are seeing more and more of, like Kimberly said, building permits, those type of things being electronically
And
transacted.
I do know that Kerry had been working on, I think he actually did an RFP. Now that we've separated off some of these other merchants from the utility billing, we've actually been in the process of getting a new rate. If it's for utilities only and we are able to separate that, we can actually get a lower merchant fee for that. And so I know Kerry Wheelwright as well as Aaron had worked on some different options to where we could maybe get some reduced fees.
Didn't you worked with Kerry a little
I
bit,
did.
Councilman Hudson, on that, didn't you?
Yeah, and it looked like, you know, the ability to go through the state through Chase was gonna be a good deal for us, and I just, anyways, like I said, it concerned me that all of a sudden we had bank charges there and there was no corresponding drop anywhere else in bank charges to offset that,
I think in this year's budget for utility billing, we're probably, the budget that we originally had at 2013, we are going to be over that. But with pulling the court out, we chose to hold the budget for next year at
Okay.
the same level.
It makes sense. Hey, I think if we can get people to sign up for online bill pay, it saves,
It's
we'd-
less staff we have to
less
have.
work back
Less
there. If it
staff.
costs us a
So-
little bit, for merchant fees, we'd much rather do that than have to go and, not that we don't wanna give people jobs, but it's so much easier if we don't have to have somebody sitting there in the chair.
No, and you're right, and I want to, I point that out, that's a great thing to point out, because the fact of the matter is, when you talk about when you talk about what did I say, we had 21,000 population, and we basically have a frontline personnel of 3 people.
Right.
And the problem we run into there, this is why personnel becomes a concern for us at times, is the same problem we have in police, is we are so tight in what we have to do, that if one of them decides to get sick and they're gone, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Or if they decide to take their vacation, we got a problem. With the PD, the problem is we're so tight on staff, and then we've got, for instance, police officers that have involved in military. So that we got 2 of them that are gone for 30 days. And that ripples through the whole organization, because we just don't have enough personnel that we start to have to kind of canceling leave times and those type of things. And so that's the challenge we have. We've been able to work it, but that'll be a continued challenge.
Yeah, and our biggest single expense is personnel.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just no way around that.
Yep. And government will always be a human capital business. It always will be. We can automate as much as we can. We try that. We got a great IT director to help us do that. But at the end of the day, government will always be pretty human capital intensive. You can see we're showing some okay growth numbers for the most part. If you look under the revenues, I mean, we are showing some good. And again, some of the numbers you're seeing this year are what we call one-time funding numbers, and so we can't be misled by that. For instance, the SAFER grant. The SAFER grant is a one-time fund that comes in on an annual basis, and so we can't count on that. So when you see some revenue growth, it's one-time funding, so we don't get excited about it.
What's the reason, a couple of the taxes that, well, the Baja tax was down 25%? Is that a use thing, or is that just part of the contract?
I think you're seeing people leave cable TV.
Yeah.
So we're just not, it's just a market thing.
And it's the same thing we're finding with telephone. People are removing their landlines, and so we're actually seeing that decline fairly significantly.
But we charge a tax for cell phones.
We do, but it's not, yeah, and it's not the same. We were not, we were given the ability to move that franchise fee up, but the council chose not to peg the franchise fee up to the same level. So there is a gap as well.
Why did the Class C road funds come in so much lower?
Class C we're actually evaluating right now, and the Class C, I'll tell you, doesn't help us at the end of the day on general fund anyway, and Kimberly can touch on that as well. But Class C, we dug into deeper, and so I'll let Kimberly talk about that, because that is a good question.
Class C is not technically going down, it's going down if you're comparing it to the budget. Last year's number is an overinflated number, and it has to do with the departments that come up with those numbers, and they go in and they look at our year-to-date comparisons, weren't aware that there are 2 months of that gets accrued back to the prior year. So when they were looking at their numbers, they were looking at almost like a 14-month total. whereas not all of that stays in one single year. So we reviewed that this year to make sure they were online. So
I just assume that whatever comes in as Class C funds stay segregated from the
Class
other
C
funds.
goes
and-
to fund the streets department. So
Correct,
that
I
is
know that.
something that we look at to make sure that we look at the streets budget, we pull out all of their debt service, because theirs is actually covered by impact fees, and then look at the rest of the operations and make sure, if we ever get
It's-
above that
it's-
limit,
It's not like
it
Social
would be
Security where we
restricted.
can take some out
Right.
and spend it here, there,
No,
and
no,
around and
so-
about.
But
Right.
I think that's a great point, because, so nobody gets confused, if we collect more Class C than both our street fund is after impact fees, then it moves up to the street capital budget. So it's still dedicated to streets, but you're right, we don't get to use it to help offset the police or the
Yeah,
fire
so
or
I
the
think we
whatever.
only have about around $50,000 more in growth unless the street, department grew, until we get beyond that. So probably another year or so, and we'll be at that.
Another line item that I saw in basically every fund is the professional and technical, and I'm not sure what that includes, but it's in every one. What is that?
You'll have to look at each department individually, and it'll be in your detailed, because for instance,
Some of those.
Mike's department, it would include our on-call engineers, and that I would assume. For departments that are having impact fee studies done, it might include the contract to do the impact fee study. But
So
each
like-
department will have a little different,
Utility department has 42,000 of professional technical. What is that?
So part of the utility department's professional and technical is for Express Bill Pay, who does our online bill pay. So it's not our merchant services, but it's our online portal for those payments. It's gonna pick up part of that. It's gonna be their percentage of, like our Springbrook, we have an annual maintenance as part of our contract for Springbrook, and they'll pick up a portion of that.
So
Will
you're
be in
giving
there.
every fund a portion of that.
And it's kind of based off of, obviously the recorder, the bill is actually broke out by the modules. The recorder's office pays 100% of the business license module, because they're the only ones that use that. And then there would be the utility billing module. So each department pays for their kind of portion of that. And it also, you might see professional and technical. A lot of departments, that's where we code like our Google subscriptions for all of our email that we have annual fees associated with that.
and
If I can just ask a question, it looks like we're gonna have to transfer money from the general fund into the irrigation fund to the tune of about $27,000.
If you choose to do the transfer, it's not budgeted, the transfer is not budgeted. The council in the past has not chosen to do that, and that department takes a loss every year.
So it can, obviously money has to go to pay for whatever it needs to pay, so it's gotta come from somewhere. You just
Right,
can't
the
carry
cash
paper
flow is
loss.
being picked up, yeah.
So,
gets picked up in a cash allocation, the general treasury.
and I guess I'm just thinking, remind me that we're subsidizing the irrigation
Yeah.
rather than charging the cost of the irrigation.
We encourage you to take that on.
I put that same note every year.
What would it do to, how many people use it, and what would be the cost per user if it actually paid for what they got?
I think there's around 360 irrigation accounts that are out there. The city probably has a third of those.
Yeah.
And we pay our monthly fee as well, same
We need
as
to
all
pay
the
more
rest.
attention to the irrigation fund altogether if we want to fix it. I would propose that rather than having the city soak up these accounts that people are getting rid of, is encourage other people to pay them. So we show 17,000, but my guess is 7 to 9 of that is actually paid by the Parks Department, whatever fund pays
Right.
those streams that are just flowing by right now. And so I think we could better market the irrigation fund and encourage people to come on, and so that would save 7 or so thousand there. I'm curious though why the manager never makes the same comment for the other funds like the golf course fund or the community center fund that loses so much more money each year.
Well,
And so why we don't
yeah, and I
also
probably
wanna
should.
emphasize those big losses.
Yeah, we've had specific discussions, detailed discussions about the other two funds, probably more so than even the irrigation fund. But you're correct. I mean, it's the same discussion.
Isn't
But
it even the same transfer type idea?
the community center is a straight transfer, so they are covered each year because of what comes out of the general fund. The golf course is a cash allocation deficit, and the
So
irrigation.
the difference is the community center is a governmental fund. It's essentially the general fund. We've pulled it out so that you can see it. It's a service provided just like any of the other general fund services. The irrigation and the golf course fund are set as enterprise funds, which means they operate as a business and would be expected to break even unless, you know, the council chose to transfer them. But it is a
But in
violation every year
practice-
that we do that.
In
So
practice, isn't the irrigation fund a general fund then? Because in practice, we essentially do what we did at the
It's-
community center, don't we?
It's not, in order to, it doesn't meet the qualifications. I mean, you could roll it into the water fund if you wanted and then just have all the water users pay for that shortfall if that's what you wanted to do. But the irrigation isn't a fund that would roll back into a governmental fund.
It's not truly a community purpose.
Right.
That's right, it doesn't meet the county
It's
rules
a
to be a
set of
governmental
specific
fund.
users. It only serves those people who have the shares.
Now, I'll tell you this, the irrigation fund has evolved because we purposely done that. Years ago, we probably didn't do quite as strong of an accounting on the cost side of the irrigation fund. Mike would go out, they'd clean ditches, they'd repair, they'd do this, and in many cases, it'd just get absorbed by whatever fund was going out and doing that. And as part of the process, some of you that have been on the council for a while will remember that we said one of our first steps is we need to get a true cost accounting. And so we have a water master that works, I believe, part-time, right, as a water master. So he's allocated part-time as a water master. And then we have to go out and do some repairs on ditches and that every year, and those are becoming. So you've actually seen kind of that cost increase. And it's not that the cost has increased, it's just they've been identified.
We also don't have any scientific pricing based on the amount of water you get. The big springs pay the same price.
I don't know, Mike would have to be the
That's
one to
correct. There
answer
is
the
no-
scientific.
There is obviously different flow rates on each of the streams, different time, different.
If we ever want to spend that time approving it.
And I think Kimberly brings up a good point about the community center. Most cities' community center sits in their general fund. So the public will not see necessarily, unless they choose to dissect their community center, they will not see the losses associated with the community center.
What percentage of our budget does the community center, of our revenue, does it use up from the general fund?
I think
Like
we're 40,
40%?
around 40%
Well, for the general, well, no, we
on operations.
contribute 40% of the, if you were to look at the community center's revenue, we are holding between, over the last 5 years, we've ranged between 44 and a 38% contribution of what their revenues that they make are. As the general fund, it's only 1%. We have a $10 million budget and we transfer, almost $1 million, so,
I
or
guess I'm
10%,
looking-
excuse
I'm
me.
looking at the question I've got on the community center revenues, we're getting more housetops, but we seem to be losing membership. If I'm looking at those figures correct in there, do we know what's going on, why we're not keeping up with the growth?
I don't think we're necessarily losing, and I think that'll be evident when you start to see their year-end estimates that come in, is I think that they overestimated what they were going to be able to do in terms of new revenue. If you look at their revenue, if I was able to pull up 2012 and see where they're gonna come in at 2013, I think it's gonna be pretty flat.
So we were overly optimistic.
But they're
in what
overly,
we
right,
have
with the
here.
programs and things, like preschool, they were gonna have 3 new classes. They decided not to do those 3 new classes. I think they only ended up with 1. So as we've gone through that, we have, required them to have a corresponding cut in their expenses to reflect the
Let me-
reduced revenue.
Let me carry on with your discussion, because we had the same question, and it's been probably 2 years now. It's probably not been terribly recent, but Barry and us, we did some inquiries into other communities on the percentage of dependence upon the general fund. And in most cases, they were at least about 50%, if not a little bit more, the general trend. So we felt like we were in pretty good shape. The other thing that people need to recognize with the community center is we're not necessarily just talking about the community center, we're talking about all the recreation programs. And all the recreation programs have always lost money. Those have always been programs that the councils and that have always felt that these are a public good to our community, and so we're willing to subsidize those. So we brought in a loss. Our outdoor pool lost money. And so we brought in those losses, and yes, we've expanded those. They become magnified. But I think we do a pretty good job in our general fund dependence, but there's always room for improvement with respect to that as well.
So how do you justify having a sporting league that loses money be subsidized by the whole population?
I think the way that cities always have, it's the whole philosophy. I always share it this
I
way.
mean, wouldn't we say that the
It's
users
almost-
should pay the fee like we try to do?
Sure, but what I think the philosophy of cities in general are that there are so many intrinsic values that come out of a good youth program that there are benefits that you can't put dollars and cents on. It's the old poem, remember, of do I put an ambulance on the hill, or do I put an ambulance in the valley or a fence on the hill? And I think with community programs, parks, recreation programs. I think there's always been a general philosophy in government out there, particularly on a local level, is that even though we can't quantify the benefits that come out of these programs to our youth, whether that's lowered crime rates, whether that's whatever else, quality of life, whatever, even though we can't necessarily put all the dollars and cents on this, we think it is worth the subsidy and is part of the common good. I think that's the general feeling. There's probably some communities that take that more to task, and there's probably some communities that actually are a little more liberal with that. But I think that's the general feeling. It's like parks. You never make any money off parks. We don't charge for them. They become quite an expense. But the fact of the matter is, people, when they come to this town, they're probably more interested in the parks than they are about our police department or our fire department.
Yeah, I agree, they may be more interested in it, but the question is, in difficult economic times, how do we minimize what we're going out? You know, if we've got a Rolls Royce, and we probably should only have a Cadillac, how do we adjust that? Because right now we're arguing over a small amount of money when we're bleeding, hemorrhaging on other things. And I don't know, the gate is open and the train's down the track, what do we do? And we start cutting costs everywhere we look. We can say, well, you know, we got youth council, $10,000 a year, that's a good program. Does it need to cost $10,000 a year for youth council? You start nickel and diming when you're putting out millions on others. That's, you hate to take away from one to subsidize another program.
Well, and when we talk about a 1% increase, first of all, our staff has done a wonderful job since 2007 and 2008 of really whittling right down to the bone. I mean, when we say you can't add 1%, you can get a 1% increase in the manager's office, for instance. That's $130 when you take out the, I mean, and in most of our departments it is that. So, and yeah, that's what we did. We still held it, with the exceptions of the recommendations on the payroll side. We've held everything that we can, but it doesn't amount to a whole lot. And that's why really the revenue source is significant to us. That is a significant discussion for us, because I'm fully convinced we can be up to 185 again per capita, and right now we're just dealing with this same thing that Salt Lake City and Cedar and St. George and all of them are kind of dealing with, and that is we're kind of transitioning between an economy that's been pretty tough.
And then let me ask one on human resources. The office expense and supplies went up 275%. Is that due to new material, new?
Employee handbooks were a big part of that for
Handbooks.
this upcoming year. We do have to update those on.
Printing cost, or?
Yeah.
We haven't printed those yet, though, have we? Yeah, I was gonna say, because I know this council's had some desire to relook at that. Good, all right. That was I seen that and I thought, I hope we haven't gone to print.
No, there's actually some changes with respect to, again, the affordable care stuff that still is waiting to get through the council.
And what happened on the income in the court? That went down almost to nothing.
Well, the courts they're a bugger to me. The courts drive me crazy, not because of the courts. I love our courts and I love the personnel in our courts. Part of the problem with the courts is the state of Utah keeps monkeying with that whole issue all the time, and part of it had to do with.
Are you
some
talking the
fee-
court costs, fees and charges, that one where it went
Yeah,
from
that went
26
from
down
almost down.
to 1,000? That, it didn't go away, it just shift locations. So we used to budget that line item, and that was where we could see our fuel surcharge that we have as part of each citation. Once we went on the Chorus system, Chorus will not break that surcharge out for us. So we can't tell how much of it is for that specific purpose anymore. So now it's reported just under fines and bills revenue.
Instead of
That's why the
under court.
fines
And
increased.
that's why it's partly up, yeah.
But even though our citations is increasing, we're not necessarily collecting
Right.
based
The
upon a
state has
citation
increased their
increase because they keep
surcharges as
increasing
well,
the surcharges. And the problem with the court I have, it has nothing to do with our courts. The problem that I have with the courts is the fact that I think the court administrator's office would like all justice courts to become state courts. And so I don't know if you know that we used to be able to appoint our own judge. We can't do that anymore. It has to go to a committee on the county level, and our mayor, I believe, gets a seat on that, but he only gets a seat on it. Our judge's salary is set by the state. If I freeze everybody out here's salary, I do not necessarily have the same right to freeze the judge's salary because of the state rules. The surcharge issue, they gave us nothing but problems on the fuel surcharge issue. They didn't want it, they made it everything but difficult for us to impose that, and it continues to be. They also set our staffing levels, just so you know. Our staffing levels in the court are set by caseload. And I made the comment to the judge the other day, because right now, because of the changes of chorus and that, our police officers are having to electronically file all the citations. So my question to the judge was, well, then are they going to take that into account with the amount of caseload, so they're not going to now force me still to get another employee up there because their workload has dropped? And the response is, well, I doubt that. So staffing is all dictated by the state. Judge's salary is dictated by the state. Surcharges and other things are dictated by the state. What percentage they take, what our fines levied, as all you attorneys know, are dictated by the state. It's a challenge for us, but I do think probably still today there is some intrinsic value to the justice court still here. We don't have to have a justice court here. The county can do the justice court. About 3 or 4 years ago, we actually analyzed it on a straight cost and benefit, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was about a break even. When you looked at the true costs and the true benefits, it was about a break even, but we chose not to make a move away from the court, because we do feel that it has got some value to our public of being right here, instead of going to St. George and having a local judge and that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if I was to redo that cost and benefit today if I'd still even see a break even, but again, there is some value to a court at some level, on a justice level. And I love the concept of a justice court. I think that there's a different mentality in a justice court, as you attorneys know, than when you go to a district court. And it just can handle your residents kind of differently, and I think almost more tenderly, if you will, than a district court would.
Did you just call our judge tender?
I did. Have you? He is. Have you seen him?
I know him well.
Yeah.
Looking, I know one of the funds that we've looked at and had quite a meeting over was our golf course fund. Looking at our snack bar lease, why is that? Why are we reducing costs on that? Revenue
Barry, you
income.
wanna?
Because it wasn't correct. It's not very much. I think it was.
Yeah, it's only $700, but I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I think instead of, I think it's $300 a month or something like that.
400. We're leasing out our snack bar for
It's only-
$400 a month.
No, that's for their utilities. They pay $25 a month for utilities. It can never go up. When they raise it up, I have to always go in and switch it down, because $25 a month, there's only 12 months in the year. It will never change unless you change the rate.
Now what? Explain that to
So
me one more
it's,
time.
they pay $25 a month to go towards the cost of utilities for power for the snack. The money that goes from the lease is reported in a different location, so.
I think that's what he's talking about. Is that the lease you're talking about? Or is it?
That's what it's showing, yeah, your snack bar lease.
$400.
Snack bar lease was at $5,500, now you're gone down to $4,800.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about the utilities.
Three.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just,
and
it's
I
just
think
the lease.
How much is that a month? I can't.
It's $400.
It's a percentage of his sales, so if he's not selling, that's what it's based off of.
Oh, so we don't have a set lease agreement?
I mean, like, it's a set lease, but it's a percentage, the lease is a percent, so you say, he'll pay
Yeah,
us a
well,
percentage of.
yeah,
the
I'd
sale.
lots rather us go into a hard lease setup. Some, that said, look, if you wanna rent our snack bar, it's $400 a month, or $500 a month, or
Well,
$600 a
and actually,
month.
some of the discussions we've had, as we mentioned to the council, is actually that will not even be part of a pro shop approach of things. And as a matter of fact,
Yeah,
we may
see,
not
I've
even
always
have a
understood
hot
that's
bar of,
what we had there. I didn't realize that we were on a percentage.
Yeah, and just
basis
looking
of
back
that.
at what's been the last few years, what we had budgeted for revenue hasn't
Certainly.
hasn't
Doesn't
achieved
matter.
that. And so we wanted to make sure it was realistic, so we looked at it, and that's what's coming.
Yeah, see, that's,
That's why that
yeah,
change is there.
okay. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that way, because I've often felt that that was something that, I mean, we wanna talk a little bit of revenue.
Well,
I've always felt we could improve some revenue
We've had this
with
discussion, and in the future, that will probably go away as far as.
Okay.
while you're on that, let me share with you, though, if I can find it real quick, some of the progress that has been made in the golf course since our last visit. If I can find it real quick, what's that called, Brian? Golf? Thank you, I got it. Golf course income statement summary. So what I have is Brian keeps track of each period, so 1 through 12 of the months. both revenue and expense-wise, and he's calculated those on fiscal year 2011, 2012, and of course, current year. And let me just give you some grand totals so far. So right now, for instance, so he's broken them down as quarter three. He's done them on calendar year, so we start with quarter three, quarter four, and then quarter one. So revenue for the quarters, we were down on quarter three. So our first quarter a little bit from the previous year. We were 140 in revenue. That was down 6%. And then quarter four, we were down we were about breaking even. And then this last quarter, we were up 6% from the previous years. Expenses are down fairly significantly. So expenses are down 80,000 year to date, periods 1 through 9.
And how's revenue?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Let me get that back. That was the average expense. So our average expenses, periods 1 through 9, are 80,000, and our average revenue is 68. So you can see we're still off, but we've made improvement there. So this year we made the revenue is 612,000 compared to last year's 613. That's revenue. So we're basically flat on revenue, but this year's expenses are 781 compared to last year's 818. So we're up compared to last year. So the gap is slightly
36,000
decreasing. Mm-hmm. But there's no doubt. I don't think the solution to the golf course. I still think we've got some discussion with the golf course.
I was just gonna say that their revenues are flat. They've been basically flat since 2010, and they're projected to pretty much stay at that.
Did we see any bump with the promotions that we've ran recently?
Well, this last quarter, it was, their last quarter that was reported, yes, was higher.
And that's when all the
What that's
promotions hit.
dependent upon, we don't know yet, but it was a higher quarter than they'd had. They will not meet their year-end, their budget revenues that they had originally budgeted. They'll come in flat compared to basically where they finished off last year's where they're gonna finish off this year. And we have the budget this year being presented as basically that. It is.
So
It's
if our
flat.
numbers in that department have been pretty steady, why did they budget a 13% increase last year in revenue? And
They're all-
why didn't they do anything the first 2 quarters to change it?
This
All I
year
can
we
say is
said
that for
no.
2014, we fixed that.
Yes.
Okay. That to me is a
We had a long talk, and that
A
was what we
serious
said. I said,
long
I'm
talk.
not
serious
taking,
problem.
I'm not gonna take it one more year
Mhm.
with that. It's not gonna happen. Here's,
Yeah,
I mean,
just
like, if
give
it
me-
does, I'd
give me
rather
s-
come in and say, woohoo, we beat it, but I don't wanna come back with another year
You're
saying,
terribly
we
optimistic.
over-projected, we over-projected.
Well, yeah, if
So-
we want that, we can say the community center's
Exactly.
gonna make an extra $1 million a year, who
So-
cares? You know, but that's not
But
what we want.
We did pay
need
off the
real
lease,
numbers.
so the lease is paid off now.
Yeah,
We
that'll
had-
help us too. The lease
Mhm.
purchase is all.
So that was part of what, but you're pretty much.
But we did see a similar thing in the community center in that we anticipated a higher than actual number of annual memberships and also higher than actual monthly memberships. I mean, we were significantly down. And I guess
Well, and the community center, I would say, concerns me less from a trending, meaning, what I mean by that is, unfortunately, and I like the way Kimberly said we had a nice long talk, because I think that's appropriate, because we've had some fairly optimistic trending in the golf course that you have not necessarily seen in the community center as far as revenue projections. Truly, it was just down this year. I think that they just projected and then it was down.
do you think that is the correlation is the reduced marketing money that we threw at it this year? Do you think had we maintained our marketing budget from last year that we would have
I don't
seen
know.
the revenue or more revenue than we?
I'm not sure. And I'll tell you, their numbers are coming in pretty strong for this last month or two, and so it's going to be very interesting, and I appreciate what Kimberly said. It's going to be very interesting to see actually what year-end is. Because we ratcheted their numbers down for the year-end projections for this year, because of course we have to come to you with a balanced budget in June. But it's going to be very interesting, because they're very strong this month, this last month and this month is looking, well, not this month, but last month came in very strong. And so it will be interesting to see year-end numbers to see kind of where they sit. But I don't know the answer exactly to that. Could it have? Yes. One of the things we did find interesting, I think, is we do have families now that, you know, it was interesting because when the economy was bad, we had less families going on vacation, and we saw actually some little bump up here. And we have had, if you remember, some discussion about this is, well, maybe this is not where they're choosing to get their passes. They're going to Disneyland this year. So I don't know. I don't know. It's always a challenge.
I think I missed the capital project projections meeting.
You did.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of those. I'm looking at the fire one right now, and it shows that we're projecting a quint for 2015. I'm of the opinion that that's a couple years early.
It could be.
Then we can
Our
push that one off.
Our capital budget, we're trying to get more and more sophisticated with our capital budgeting, and we certainly appreciate Brian and Kimberly's department for creating, I'm jumping down there, Councilman, so excuse me. We're getting better with these cash flow worksheets that we're now providing for you. That's what you're seeing there as kind of a cash flow capital worksheet. We're getting better at those. And so the reality with capital is, if we don't have the sources, they just get pushed. Or if the population was to slow down or whatever else, let's say they're impact fee driven and the population slows down, which is probably a different model than the Water Conservancy District is using.
Yeah.
But we would just slow the construction of X or Y down.
So I see on streets Sunrise Valley Road this year for 500,000. Is that becoming a priority? Is that something we're gonna try and fund this year?
Just off the bridge,
Which direction?
it would be connecting the bridge to the landfill road. And we don't know. It's gonna be largely dependent upon if when the property owner, and it has gone through the foreclosure now, so it is owned by the Sorensen Management Group, but in all my communications with them, they have yet to say that they're willing to. This was kind of the quid pro quo for getting the bridge. The several $million bridge was to put the road in. Plus then, as you can see from my economic development, that opens up some economic development options for us as well.
It's also some target range options. I'm
Could be
teasing.
that.
I'm teasing, but I know that people
But,
still like to.
but if we don't get that, I think that's gonna be driven by the bridge, don't you think, Mike? So if the bridge
So what
doesn't
you're
come
saying
in,
is, we're not gonna do that unless the bridge becomes dedicated to us?
because otherwise we put in a road to nowhere.
Exactly, well, that was my thing, is why are we building a road across private properties? We don't
We
ever
wouldn't.
do that any other time.
We wouldn't.
Okay. The cemetery, 250,000. I know there's still a lot of fluid conversations on that.
Yeah, we're hoping to make that less fluid in a couple weeks with you. But
Okay.
the reason the 250 is put there is that's just what is available funds left in that capital budget.
Okay. I'm looking at the Virgin River Trail connection, 800,000 this year. I'm assuming that's north from Sullivan over to the trail formerly known as Hellhole.
Yeah, and we'd like to jump on that when we get permission, so we don't lose that permission, is the reason we haven't had it up to this point.
Okay. And then I see the two Sullivan Park phases out there a long ways out. I'd like to have another discussion. I don't get it. My impression from people is they want that park finished sooner, and they would rather just have something to do there than wait 3 or 4 years for an artificial field. I'm personally not in love with the artificial fields concept.
Yeah, cost-wise, you're probably close to the same. Till you put in an irrigation system.
Do we have enough water flowing down there to help water natural grass parks so we could water more fields than what we already water?
We did, one of the things we did talk
Can
about,
we
and I
chop
doubt you'd
up
get
the
much.
goldfish
But
for
when we talked
fertilizer?
about,
Catfish fertilizer.
when we talked about artificial turf, it would have been my objective if we did decide to pursue that, that it would all be dependent on what kind of a grant we could receive from the Water Conservancy District. Because, I mean, they do give grants, and even if they do give grants for people to convert their natural grass into
The problem you
artificial.
run into with those is that you have to replace them every 10 years.
Well,
And it's almost the same cost to replace it. Dixie College had to replace theirs. Go look at Pine View's
Yeah,
field
I'm not
right
sure
now.
that,
It's
I'm not sure
need to
where,
be replaced.
you know, that we really have a strong dog in the fight on this issue.
and our citizens don't have artificial turf shoes.
Yeah, mowing,
I'd like to see
fertilizer.
baseball fields down there that have have outfields that back up to each other so we can dual utilize it, but get a couple more fields right there also to play on. But I realize that's not part of this year's budget.
That's why we're kind of at least excited about having a cemetery discussion with you, because we think that we've kind of at least resolved a potential pinch with regards to the facilities there.
But Councilman Seymour, that did come up in our capital budget when we looked at that too. I think I had mentioned that to Barry, and that's the kind of the feedback that I've gotten too from a lot of our citizens, that they'd like to see more either baseball or softball fields down there, and I think a combination could work nicely.
One of the things, if you get into the detail, it's so much fun. Thank you for the detail. And you guys know I'm more of a nerd with this, so I get into that detail a little more, but, under the, professional and technical, wait, it's not professional technical, it's under, it's under HR, or professional and technical, under human resources, under miscellaneous supplies. It's not very much, it's only $600 a year, but, I don't think that we need to budget money to be spent on council and planning commission Christmas gifts. It's not very much, but I just don't feel like I'm okay if I just don't get a Christmas gift from the city. And so I don't know about any of the rest of you, but when I saw that.
It's the only gift I get.
I'll bring you something, but I just, we ask a lot of our staff and everybody else, and I feel like we get compensated already, and so,
Is there any way to get Springbrook to number the operational budget detail pages?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there a way to get Springbrook to put numbers on those pages?
sorry, yeah, it's.
Maybe at these trainings? Because it makes it difficult to go through without numbers.
Although it is nice, because we're seeing
Yeah,
the revenue and
numbered,
expense.
So it's
better.
difficult to.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know, I'm weird that way.
Yeah, I don't mind that, Bill. I'm with you there.
I don't have a problem either, council.
I'm still trying to find out where you were.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you how to get there, but I'm there.
You said it was under HR.
Yes. And I had to print it off because it's too confusing. On administrative services, when does our contract expire with Baja Broadband for our internet service here?
Why don't we have Steve talk on that issue, because Steve's kept his eye on that issue, and he can maybe fill you in on interlinks and some of our other options.
You put that hat
or
on,
lack
that's all
of.
right.
We don't currently have a contract with Baja, we're just
Okay.
paying them still, so as soon as Interlinks is in and we can, do something different, which may include Baja again, we can do that.
Have we talked to them at all just to see if they'd be willing to do it for less? What we're
Baja?
currently getting? Yeah.
Well, no, but they did try to increase it and we
Did they?
stopped that, yes.
Okay.
We've never
And
had
if you
something
remember,
like
this
that.
next week, you'll have the transfer assumption language from Baja to TDS on your council agenda, so you'll have a new one.
So it's going through right away.
So when the
Wow, that's
council
pretty
approves it,
fast.
Of course, you can't deny it, but you.
That's
Sir.
happening a lot faster than I anticipated.
Yeah, we're
it
actually
would
the
be.
last, I think we're again back to our reputation, according to Jeff Starkey, and that is, every city signed, here's the response we got back from their legal. Because we asked the question, what other cities have signed the assumption language? And our response was, every city has signed it, but you, none of them even really had a question. We took that with great pride.
Well, we should.
And remember, the agreement you approved with Interlinks would let us own our internal network, so we're only getting services into the building, which will be significantly cheaper.
Right.
And they are working with Kelly, I don't know the exact progress, but I know it's in progress.
So it is hopefully
The Interlinks project is, yes.
good.
Something just to throw out to the council, and maybe tonight's not appropriate, it may just muddy the water, but I've been doing some thinking, especially, it kind of fits in with what Councilman Truman has talked a little bit about with some of our funds that continue to lose and ways we can cut and save. But one of my thought processes, and I don't want to see Drew get up and run either at me or out the door, but
He already left, it looks like.
good. One of my thoughts that I've had is, and I've looked a little at it and would like to look a little further at it, is privatizing inspections from our building department to where they're no longer under the city's, where it becomes a private business for somebody out there to do those inspections, so we don't have the cost of employees and those types of things. And I don't know, I mean, save us 2.5 employees right now.
I've had that
Plus
same discussion
vehicles
with
and-
citizens.
Well, I guess what spurred even my thought process is I've got a couple emails from other cities around the country which have done it. And it seems to be beneficial to the city because of lowered costs, and the communities that they serve are actually getting better service. And so it becomes beneficial to both parties involved. And so, like I said, tonight might not be appropriate because obviously we're not, I mean, next year's budget, it may just muddy the water, but it's certainly some food for thought for looking down the road.
I think anytime we can look at things like that, I'm all for it. Yeah, I think we should definitely have that discussion. Go ahead.
I think, yeah, and just to add on that, I agree with Councilman Turek, is that you can look at each one of the departments and say, okay, what can we really contract out and get a flat fee, just like the snack shop in the center. You know, you might get some private industry to come in and say, I'll run that snack shop and I'll give you a fixed amount of money, and you've got your money, and they might have an incentive to make a profit on it. So on any of the services we offer, if we can find that you can contract it out and get a better bang for your buck, we ought to look at that.
So now that we've talked about a lot of the small level stuff, the big stuff to me, I look at salaries, benefits are the two big ones, the two biggies. And I know that that Roger's recommended, and I would support a change on benefits to the 80-20 as you described it in your papers. I think that's important, and I fear the future of healthcare altogether, so I don't know where it's coming from, but I think we've got to start moving in a direction to contemplate the fear that's coming.
What was if you don't mind me breaking in, what was the increase in pension costs this year? Was there was it a percentage, or was it just a flat dollar amount?
Well, it depends on what pension fund you're in, because you got public safety that's in a
Right.
different, I actually think I wrote that in one of the memos, so let me see if I can find it real quick.
I was trying to find that, and I couldn't remember if it was.
It's in one of these memos, so don't run out. I can probably get it just as quickly.
I had a question as I was looking through it, Roger. Do we, in addition to participating in the URS system for full-time employees, do we contribute to the 401k system
do.
as well?
Mm-hmm.
So an employee who gets a URS contribution also gets a 401k
Correct.
contribution?
Mm-hmm.
And what's our policy on that?
Well, our policy is just, is it 4%? 4.5% for full-time.
And how much is the URS? For
Well-
not public safety.
What, you 13, 17? I can pull that memo.
So there's a
Just
21% contribution.
Right, yeah. Does the employee have to pay anything into the 401k to get the 4.5?
no, not currently. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, URS is more of a pension where you've got to do your years, and it all works out based on how many years and what you're paid at the time. The way I look at it is, as we're considering what it takes to keep qualified employees, we look at our benefits, we look at our health care, we look at our wages. I think we're at or above on salaries. I know we're at or above on retirement and at or above on health care. If I were gonna strike one thing out of this to try and bring us back to maybe use less fund balance than we have been, I would say, Roger, that I would keep the salary static again this year, not do the 2% increase, and then use those extra funds that would be saved to push towards not using fund balance. So that would be my big level, I guess, cut, and it kind of carries on some of Councilman Turek's comments from a week or two ago.
One thing I may just throw in, I know that fund balance is always a concern, and I appreciate Councilman Truman saying, look, you continue to bleed. But also remember, that's what fund balances are for. They are to pick up the short years. And so I don't think it's such a negative thing to say we're using fund balance, as long as we've identified that it is a trend, and we say, okay, we've got to work on correcting the trend. But we're still very healthy in fund balance. It isn't like we're bleeding to the point that we're starting to get dizzy yet. But I certainly appreciate the fact that we've noticed it. We've got to address it. We've got to look at it. But also, I don't think we need to panic about it.
Well, can I follow that trend? Because you do have cities that actually have a specific policy on fund balance, because this is what they say is they set the fund balance percentage.
Right.
They say this is what we want to keep, and those, of course, have to be within the prescribed law. But then they say that anything above that on the fund balance, we will push into the next year. And what that keeps from happening in many cases is you don't get this rush to expend your budget, because you lose it.
What do you mean by pushing the next year?
So what they do is they count fund balance as a revenue. They say as long as we're maintaining, let's say 18% is their number. They say as long as we have 18%, we're healthy with that. We're comfortable with that. So any fund balance up and above that, we will count that as a revenue source for the next year.
But
So
the
departments can
18%
save
a
this
moving
year and
target in and
spend
of
the next
itself,
year.
though, right?
What's that?
Because it's a percentage of a number that, it's 18% of total budget, right?
It's 18% of total.
It's, well, right, it's 18% until the legislation passed a new law, now it's
Yeah.
25. And that's effective
As a cap.
immediately, as a
As
cap.
a
There's
maximum.
a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 25
But of what?
of the next year's. So for 2013, we cannot exceed 25% of the 2014 general fund revenue less transfers and contributions.
So it is just general fund then?
Only general fund.
That's right. And this is why you will never hit it precisely.
And I
Yeah,
did want
it's
to
a moving
remind,
target.
the
It's-
As a matter
reason-
of fact, when we were 18%, when we were holding it at the cap, we knew that we ran a very high probability. Let's say we ran it at 17.5. We knew we ran a very high probability of exceeding the max, because we didn't quite know what those numbers were.
we do have a current policy adopted, and right now it's 15%.
Yeah.
Is the policy the council had
Council's
previously
adopted
adopted
15%.
when our cap was 18. One of the reasons we have used fund balance, beside the fact that we needed it, was that we, even during these times of need, we've been over what the state maximum has been. And so, anytime that's gonna happen, you either need to use it or you transfer it to capital projects for, use on your
Has the
capital
governor
items
signed
and stuff.
the new law into effect?
I don't know if it's been signed, but
I think
the
we'll go
report
into
that came
effect
out
for
said
fiscal
it
year
took,
2014,
it
though.
said it took effect with your immediate budget, but I don't know if that was because they were talking calendar years for those other ones.
Can we get that, can we bring that policy back before the council now that the statute
Raise
has
that.
changed, to reconsider that? I don't know what I'm gonna do on it, but if the state ceiling has changed, let's bring it back and talk about it, whether we wanna change our ceiling or our policy.
So if you didn't, if you use 0 fund balance this year, we obviously are projecting the need to use it, but if we use none of it, right now the estimate would be that we'd have 20% fund balance. If we use what we need in our budget, we'd be right around 18.
Which is the 343,486. That's,
Correct,
we're dipping into savings essentially is what we're saying.
yes, and that would hold us at the 18% that was the prior cap.
And again, my point is so I just want to point out that some cities say, we're going to make the policy on what our fund is going to be, and then above and beyond that, it becomes a source for the next year that we move in.
Where does the $3 million for the police station fit into the general funds? And
It'd
doesn't
be,
that come out of the
well, our
general fund
recommendation,
and-
we haven't had the discussion yet on that, but our recommendation is going to be that that's an
Borrow?
impact fee related.
I thought we talked about that it couldn't be an impact fee.
If we develop our capital facilities plan, it is. So there's some steps we have to go to get to that. And if you remember, because operationally, you can't do it. Yeah, matter of fact,
So-
operationally, you probably couldn't do it in the next 5 to 10 years.
So you're gonna increase the building permit fees to bring in that as part of a specific impact fee?
Or you could adjust your other impact fees as well.
And that has a whipsaw, because pretty soon it'll be more expensive than other cities.
We're already more expensive than other cities, but we still keep
So
going.
we might not be the city of choice too long.
Oh, we're the city of choice. By the sheer numbers, we're the city of choice. We've exceeded building permit even ahead of St. George in a few years. So again, my point is with respect to that is if you're just looking at the growth numbers, it has not seemed to discourage them from wanting to locate in Washington City. And again, we have probably a very strict impact fee approach, and that is if the capital facility says this is what it ought to be, it really ought to be this. It can be lower than that, it can't be higher than that by law. But one of the recommendations I made is one of the things that you do have as a council, the legislative body with the impact fee, is you have the ability within the impact fee to kind of ebb and flow that impact fee. And I truly believe that you do have the option of not increasing the net impact fee at all, but still address a need that is there no matter how we look at it.
I guess my overall opinion on that is I agree with Thad as far as, if we're in tight times, I don't think we're out of the thicket yet. I don't think we see that economic boom at mile marker 13. We've been talking about that at least the whole time I've been on the city council, and nothing's happened there. And so I'm the one I don't think you spend money before you see it coming in, and I don't think the general population out there is seeing pay increases and similar benefit packages that the city has, and to continue to increase there when most people are tightening their budgets, I just feel uncomfortable with that. So I would say status quo is my opinion on it.
So status quo, I want to be clear on this, status quo in the general fund will reduce your fund balance by $50,000.
I would probably, to throw my 2 cents in, I would still think that somebody ought to get paid at least to the 100% level of what they're worth. So I would suggest that people that are underneath the 100% of their
That's all it
value.
was, wasn't it? That's all that the
No, it
recommendation
No,
wasn't.
this
was.
year we included those over 100 because they've gone, this will be their 6th year without a pay adjustment.
So I think people that, people that are tenured, that are probably already at or over 100% have received pay increases over years and years, whereas those that have come on later and received satisfactory performance reviews haven't received pay increases with commensurate duties that they have. So I would suggest that if we're going to take anything away, that we take away pay increases for those that are already being paid to competency, but that we do give pay increase to those that are paid, doing a competent job but not being paid to competency. So 2% for up to the 100% level.
Let me understand what you've got written here, Roger. My recollection from last year is we were trying to bring those under 100 up to 100.
No,
Or
we were
up to
just
the
bringing them to the
next
5th percentile mark.
Just give them some growth.
So in some cases, if they were at 89, they go 1%.
And I'm not saying that they go all the way to 100%, but I'm saying that
Yes, no.
what was it, the
And we
2 or
didn't budget
3
for
or to
that.
the 5th, we still continue to help them get at least to that
That's right.
Working
that
towards
competency to the levels. Benefits aside, there's still a range, and a lot of these guys came in on the very bottom of the range that didn't benefit from tenure having regular pay increases over the years. So
And so your comment says the last 4 or 5 years, those that were 100% or above haven't received any increase.
That's correct.
And then your recommendation is that
Uh,
all
uh,
employees,
as
Correct.
those below haven't either.
Well,
Other than last year.
Last-
Other
with
than
the
last
exception
year.
of last year, that's correct.
and then you say all employees who receive an acceptable performance will receive a 2% pay adjustment. My assumption through that is that most of this 2% is going to be people that are at 100% or above.
No, very little of it. What would you guess, Ruth?
I'd say 75% of
Yeah. We have very few people actually above the 100% mark.
Okay.
Here's the concern I have, Roger, as we look at this. We see pension benefits this year increasing. Let's just look at general fund, $45,000. We don't have any control over that. So just to keep the same employees that we already have, if we don't change anything, we're already paying $45,000 more. And we know that our revenues aren't increasing very much, 120,000 this year. So a third of that is already being eaten up just in pension increases. And we know we need new we need new police officers, we need all these other departments. I struggle continuing to increase wages and things right there when we have other needs. When there's builders who can't get a building permit in less than 30 days, when there's not enough police officers on the street. I understand that they've worked really hard for 6 years without a raise. I don't wish anybody never gets a raise. I just it's that balancing act that we're trying to find. I wish that our revenue went up 400,000 and then it probably wouldn't be a question. But I'm struggling giving that and seeing these pension costs increasing, and I don't see that that's going to change in the future. Do we think it's going to steady off, or it's going to go up again, right?
Well,
It's going to maintain the same
Same percentage?
And yes, there will be a time when it levels off, but it's because of the, just
Right.
like everybody's investments.
Right.
It's just the actuarial figures need to be balanced out again.
And so it's not that I'm, it's just trying to find that balance where we still have to provide more services. We have more people moving in. How do we provide that if all of our increased revenue that we make every year, we give to raises?
Well, part of the challenge I have is really kind of, it's almost, because of the increased revenue, one of the dilemmas I have, and let me just share the dilemma I have, is that I really am not gonna be able to fill with the remaining revenues any additional employees. So it would, probably our recommendation, I mean, we might be able to get a part-time here and a part-time there, maybe one officer or that, but the problem is I'm still not addressing the personnel need either.
So
So I'm
50,000
either-
wouldn't provide enough, the 50,000 to adjustment wouldn't put a full-time building inspector with the part-time money that's already there?
Well, I've already got a part-time. 50,000 probably would still be a little short, wouldn't it, for a full-time
Yeah,
with benefits? Yeah, it would be too short.
but we added a part-time.
We added the part-time. That is the
So-
one position
so-
we did add. is
So
a
if, so
part-time.
we're already adding part of that, so you add that to the 50,000 that's already there. Is there money there to do the inspector? Because
To do another half-time?
no,
So you
I'm
make
saying
it a
you're already having a part-time inspector. I don't know what that dollar figure is.
You're saying make that
Add
part-time
that,
a full-time?
make that part-time a
Yeah,
full-time,
we could
so.
do, well, we could do that.
So
if we
would
put
would that
money back in.
50,000 do that?
We could do that.
And that's where I'm looking
Could we
at.
do that with giving raises to those just beneath 100%?
I don't think so without running the numbers, because the fact of the matter is you're really only gonna shave a few thousand. I mean, you're $50,000 in the general fund for raises. You're probably gonna shave maybe $8,000 or $9,000 off for people over 100% tops, because most of them are under 100%.
Yeah.
And so it's not gonna gain you a lot by just shaving the over 100% off.
So am I looking at the wrong figure where it says 98,000 for payroll adjustment versus where are we getting the 50?
50's just the general fund, 98 total
Yeah,
is
we're
for
just
all
talking general
funds.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because a lot of these guys are paid out of.
98 is for all
Yes.
funds, so that's electrical and water
see, I
and all
just-
And
that.
that's where the fund balance is,
Yeah.
and that's where the balancing act is in those funds. So that's where we kind of focus.
I just still gotta think, I know that the private sector's tough, but I still gotta think that employee morale is important, and that a motivate, if we're dropping healthcare benefits back, I just gotta think, people gotta have at least some incentive, some motivation to continue to, achieve. We're asking more and more and more. I think if there's places to cut, I don't think it's in raises.
Well, I think,
I'd rather
it's
see
the
the
only
raises
place.
go.
if you talk to the employees, I think you would find that they would rather forego the pay raise and keep their benefit level. You give an employee at the lower end a 2% pay increase, but dock them on their insurance. If they want to buy up, it's gonna cost them more than their pay increase. So I think the employee morale is speaking more, let's keep our benefits and skip the pay raises, but our budget's saying, let's don't do either
Well,
with it, so.
I just look at what I see from the big picture is the last 5 years, I know hundreds of people that would have given anything to have a job at Washington City without any pay raises. I mean, and so I think we offer a very nice package to our employees, a very, very nice package. And we also just have to value the whole package and determine what we want to add, what we don't, and how we deal with that. And so,
It's a tough number, because you look at our percentage of benefits to what salaries are, and we're well over 50%. And as I compare, and I've pulled budgets of neighboring cities, no one is with close to 50%. And so I worry that we're setting a precedence.
Well, I think you need to be careful what you're looking at, because for instance, in our benefit package, we include everything, including Social Security, FICA, and all those, and they do not necessarily put those numbers in their benefit numbers.
Okay.
And so you need to be very careful doing that, because when we give you a benefit number, it's every number that is truly a benefit to the employee, but we don't have a choice on. So
Right.
FICA, Medicare, all that are included in our benefit numbers, and those are sizable. I can tell you right now that I know for a fact that many cities, when they're showing their benefit package, they are not showing, those are cost of payroll. Those are not benefits. So you have to be very careful with that.
Okay.
And you'll see significant percentage differences just in the social security side,
No, I can see that.
because they just mark it as a cost of payroll. They
Okay.
don't mark it as a benefit. We do.
Yeah. Yeah, but I still think you look at the private sector, how many businesses offer approximately 20% with no contribution towards a retirement fund?
I think the URS system alone is a great benefit, if you can do at least 4 years. If you can do long enough that, and then I think it's even greater that we can give them a cash 401k on top of that. And so you add that and then look at where we're at on wages and everything else, and our package is a very, very nice package.
Back to the overall budget here, and, you know, there's 139 pages of fine print, and it's great, it is, but I'm just looking, mainly from property tax and sales tax revenue, we're projecting over $300,000 more in revenue, and only real difference I see is adding a part-time inspector, and now I see us swinging over $600,000, pulling $346,000 from fund balance, and I'm trying to figure out where that gap is. Am I
Well, a
missing
lot of the
something?
revenue you're seeing is one-time revenue, so we're not, for safer grants.
But I didn't include the SAFER grant in that, I just included property taxes and sales tax revenue, and I still had us at a positive of $332,000 in just revenues, and now I'm seeing that to make this budget balance, we've got to pull $346,000 from, and I'm just trying to figure out what I'm missing from fund balance.
Well, and again,
Where am I?
part of the problem is you're looking at total numbers, but you're only taking two revenue sources, because we did have some revenue numbers we brought down. So those are gonna offset some of your.
I mean, right on page 10, the first page of the general ledger budget, I mean, we look at property taxes are gonna be up 140,000. Page 1 of the general,
Of the actual ledger.
of the ledger itself. So property taxes, and then there's some delinquent property taxes that you back out, so 140 minus 65,000, so you're 85,000 over and above last year for property taxes, and then general sales tax, we still say 232,000 just on, that aren't allocated to highway, just to state 232,000, so just those numbers, you know, not worrying about the SAFER grant and some of the other things that kind of flush themselves out, I come that we're 332,000 more in revenue, but I don't understand what expenses are driving us
Well, and again, you're
346,000
looking at
into the
budget to
hole.
budget, so if you look at state share on revenue of Class C, you're dropping 119 off that. So you kinda gotta look at it as an entirety. because
So you're saying on sales tax,
on well, if you look at the state shared revenue.
I'm on fund number 3130.
Yeah, my point is, you're right, but what you're doing is you're picking the two high ones and saying, well,
Right.
these are all gonna be money that I have available, but what you gotta look at also is the revenue sources that are below. And we're looking at budget to budget, not actual to budget, but you're also not looking at, like, for instance, the intergovernmental revenue is down, or state shared revenue is down 119,000. So that's gotta come from somewhere.
So an example would
Oh, on the
be
Class C roads and the
If you look at
liquor
just the-
allotment,
the total for the general fund revenue, okay? If you look to your main sheet,
146,000 up,
the
is that?
total increase for the general fund, it reports, it says it's like 514,000.
What page will I see
So
that on?
this should be,
Page
it's
5 of
like
the
page,
actual ledger.
it's,
Yeah, page 5.
is it,
And out of
okay.
that, you
So
have
it's
to
gonna give
back
you the
out
general fund grand revenue
251.
total. And the difference between revenue this year and revenue last year's budget was 414,000, okay? Or 514,000, excuse me. And again, you're comparing budget to budget, not necessarily budget to actual. We talked about how Class C road funds were over budgeted last year and so forth. But even if I leave all that to an extent in, of that $514,000, 394 of it is related to pass-on money. The SAFER grant.
Okay, so the
you're
SAFER
looking
grant's
at
251, so that
And then
leaves
you've
us
got the
253 less.
solid waste user fees are up 134,000. We
Okay,
don't
so
keep
that's
that
what I'm
money.
asking, where is
Yes.
this
So we
going?
have, if I just only pull those two things out, and that's it, then the difference that's left is 120,000.
So we're
of
up
new revenue.
120,000.
And
Now we're
that's
taking-
budget compared to budget, and I've
Well,
already
you've got
talked
41,000
about.
in dispatch fees that you're up this year compared to higher than
Well,
you were
that's
last
just
year.
police department, the
That's what I
fire
said.
department's over
Dispatch.
Then
13.
yeah, that's just your police dispatch is 41,000 higher than last year.
Your highway tax is up 20,000, that's a straight pass-through to the Class C, or to the capital project fund for streets. And again, it's a budget to budget comparison, and we talked about the Class C road funds. Last year, it had a budget of 800, and this year it's at 7. Well, that's not actual money. I mean, you just wiped out all of your new growth that you thought that you had in revenue. I mean, like
Oh, with
it's
those
flat
2
in
extra
terms of
months.
things coming in and coming out. You're pretty flat on revenue, and yet we still
So
have
while it looks like there's an increase in revenue.
right. That's why I said,
So
like
much
when
as
you,
one
because
time.
you're doing grand total comparisons is why. And so if you start to pull out things and say, well, we can't use any of this money to fund operations in the general fund. It gets reported as revenue in the general fund, but it doesn't get to count for,
It's gonna help the general.
right, to help with our costs. Then, I mean, the general fund in terms of new revenue, there really wasn't any.
So what she means by the solid waste fees is those are up higher, but every bit of those dollars have to go out.
You know, like we get like
Oh, they just offset.
They
we
offset.
get like $1 out of the $11 or that we charge or something like that, so. So like I said, when I pulled just only those 2 items, you'd say, well, okay, well, we've got 120,000. If immediately the only thing else you look at would be like Class C road funds, just a budget to budget comparison, I mean, there really isn't any. I mean, it's one of those things that I completely understand. If you don't think we didn't have 100 conversations on this exact point, how could we not have any more money to spend when you say sales tax is up and this is up and this is up?
Yeah, because, I mean, you
where
look at
is
it, at the very top, you see property taxes, if you back out delinquent, your property taxes are up 85,000, and your just sales tax are up 232,000.
Actually, this is probably one of the most challenging budget years that I've experienced with the general fund at Washington City, despite all of the challenging years that you'd say that we have had.
So it's
And the
not,
reason is because we've gone for so many years being held so tight and trying to cut back and cut back. And this is the year where you start to look and you go, well,
you
sales
think we're
tax
gonna
numbers
get
are
ahead,
up.
and then it's like,
These numbers are up. Ooh, things are gonna look good.
There's nothing
And then
there.
you have these other things that and it's really not there, and it was really hard.
So
It was a
again,
really
the other
hard year.
things on a revenue side, just help me understand
Okay.
big picture, the other things that just killed us. And we just talked about them, but say it again, because I'm not the smartest guy up here.
Okay, so you just wanna talk things that are down?
Yeah,
Is
what
that we wanna-
cut into our revenue so much? What the-
Okay, so delinquent prior year taxes, they're down. Well,
What-
property taxes too, just to keep in mind, we'll end up with more property tax than we're budgeting. We're just not allowed to budget beyond what the certified tax rate will be. Okay, so we will, I
So we
can tell
think
you
with
right now, we will
increased
come in
rooftops-
with more money, but we
can't.
we can't budget for it, okay? So that was one of the reasons, if Roger talked about, we're looking at personnel hires and saying, what if we start transitioning and don't do things until January? Because January is when we see real numbers for some of these other items, that we'd have a better idea of what kind of funding we're looking at. So that is something that we can't control that. We know we're gonna have more money. We can't budget for it, therefore we can't spend it. So, you're just
So we might have
restricted.
somewhere in the neighborhood of what Councilman Sigmiller said, with the
what was his?
$200 times, what do we guess, 4 or 5, what'd you say,
I
like
don't know, I'm sure
70,000?
70 grand.
I'd-
70,000 on property taxes.
I would probably, I default to Kerry Will,
And
right?
maybe
He
even
does that,
more,
but I'd
if
say
we had 72 permits
it's
last
probably
month.
reasonable to say something like that, but you'd have to, Kerry Wheelwright does our calculations, and I would defer to his on that, so. Property tax, delinquent years are down. That just means that more people are paying on time, which means you might see an increase in current year, but that's because less people are paying behind.
We want them to
Type
pay
of
on time, we
scenario,
don't want
so-
delinquent.
Did we see that in our actuals for this year, for
The down
2013?
Yes.
No, did we see the up
in the
Did-
property tax?
Property
in those
tax up,
delinquents? So we
Oh,
saw
and
those
the
delinquents
delinquents
come
go
the
down.
off.
delinquents, I can tell you
Delinquents are
really
down.
quick. Yeah, meaning that less,
They're paying.
we have
Less
less
paid.
So more of them
delinquent
paid in.
collection.
On time.
Correct.
Yeah, I was gonna say, more of them paid in this
More are
time,
paying
so.
on time.
And that's been very much just an indicator of the economy.
And that has to do with,
Certainly.
right, when you have property sales taking place as we do now, taxes get paid at closing, things have to get
I
caught up
seen
to
that the
current.
county created quite a dilemma when they all showed up with cash and paid them.
Ah,
Did you see that? It's crazy. Over $700,000 in one day in cash showed up over there, coming out of Colorado, Hilldale.
Really? Funny.
And they didn't know how to handle it. They called the sheriff to take it to the bank.
They were
um,
bringing chickens.
Yeah. There's gotta be a printing
One of the-
press somewhere.
one of the departments, and I guess, I know we talked about maintenance shop was gonna be weird, but it's weird.
It's weird.
It won't be as much as it seems, and I can have Kimberly spend some time on this, but it won't be, but just the way it's got to be reflected right now in the budget, it
Wednesday
does
when you
look-
see it, well, and
Yeah.
it's gonna change. When you see your tentative budget, you will not see a shop budget in the general fund.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
so
won't-
that'll.
You won't see it there, but that money is not going away, so that's where I have to clarify for you. This exact budget and these exact amounts you will see moving over to a fleet division. It's a proprietary fund, it's as an internal service, not an enterprise, but an internal service fund. And, so the budget that you see is the budget that we are going to move over. However, of the expenses, obviously there has to be some revenue that comes in to cover that we've moved over, and that will be invoices that basically the fleet, the actual owners of the vehicles, the departments will pay those invoices. So what we will do is this operation expense, we look at fleet by percentage of department, and right now 87% of it is the general fund. So if you wanted to anticipate, 87% of these expenses you see right now will also stay in the general fund. What you're gonna see is an increase in equipment supply and maintenance. We may create a separate line item that will just be equipment and vehicle maintenance, so you can kind of see that. So there'll be a small percentage of this that will go away from the general fund, but a large portion will stay.
What did we, while you're talking on that, with salaries, because that is one of your significant jumps, why did we hire
Well,
another?
No, well, we did hire more, but the other thing you need to keep in mind is when you're doing a budget-to-budget comparison, for 2013, the entire fleet division was allocated out by fleet already. So a portion of the wages you saw were in water and sewer and
Correct.
all these divisions, and right now you're seeing 100% of the costs
So you're
right
bringing
here.
it all
You're
back
bringing
under
it
fleet
right
in
now,
order to move.
and then it's gonna move over, and then about 87% will stay, because it
Okay,
becomes the revenue
alright.
source going in to pay those bills.
Okay.
I know,
You always have to keep us guessing year after year. We just try to figure it out
I
years.
know.
Yeah, we just get it down and then you guys throw something
You'll
else
see
at
this
us.
one, and this one will make, this one will make complete sense when we, this is the right way, I think, to transition this. We really
It is.
struggled with the transition on this, but I think this is the appropriate way to transition, the way we're doing it.
So that's why we're seeing a decrease in some of these other funds, like the water, it looks like salaries have come down.
If theirs are coming, right,
Treatment,
well, they would have previously had a percentage of fleet that is not being reflected in 2014.
I just thought Mike was let somebody go or something, yeah. He's like, we can get by with some.
So at the end of the day, Mike, you get a raise,
Some
nobody else
less
does.
people. It makes sense.
Kimberly alluded to some policy discussions that we've had internally, and that is the fact that, I think you're still gonna find that Washington City, I mentioned to our department heads that we've always had this attitude that if you're gonna err on the side of being conservative. This year I changed it a little bit and said, I don't want you to err at all, I want you to be absolutely accurate in your forecasting. Now, we know that that's not a reality. It's more of an art than it is science. But the fact of the matter is, I still think we always err on the side of conservatism. And so one of the policy discussions we had a little bit, so you could see at the end of the year that this budget is a little bit looser than you're seeing it today. But one of the policy decisions we talked about is that historically we've always done new hires July 1st, start of the fiscal year. I'd like to actually change that to all new hires occur on January 1st, and that gives us 6 months of the year to evaluate. See, because sometimes in the years past, we've actually had a hire on July 1st, as we talked about a couple of councils ago, and all of a sudden we've said, oh, hold on, we're gonna hold that hire for a while. The only time that will cause a discomfort for our staff is on the first year you do that. But we're already causing them discomfort this year. I'd like to make that policy change this year. So any new hires we would ever have in the future would always occur around January 1st, not July 1st, and that gives us time to evaluate and see if the budget numbers are coming in the way they are supposed to. And that's just a simple fact. So part of my recommendation this evening, and again, what I love about this at the end of the day is I can make the recommendation and you guys make the decision. But part of my recommendation is the fact that, we are really, for the most part, foregoing personnel and continuing to ask our personnel to do, to just pick up the additional demands of the population. So to me, it didn't seem unreasonable to make a recommendation of a 2%, and also again, in light of the benefit changes. And again, then in January, we can still have some discussion with regards to personnel. Now, the only exception to this would be the building inspector, part-time building inspector. He's budgeted starting July 1st. But then in January, if we find that these budget numbers are looser than they are, or if the council still has a desire to move one direction or another with personnel, we're not just simply saying for the next 12 months, we will not talk about this again. But rather, we can take a look at this, and if we are overly conservative, we can bring that to the council and have a discussion about it.
So is that what happened when we didn't hire the parks guys? Except that discussion never came to us, just on your level, the decision was not to hire?
Well, no, it wasn't to hire, it was to hold on the hiring.
Yeah,
So, and then there was some miscommunication.
I like their policy where they waited a year.
Yeah, they almost did. By the way, those interviews
We
are
actually
happening
held
Friday.
on all new hires. What happened, we talked, I think you might have been gone at the meeting that we talked about this, but we actually that year, which I guess would be this year, we held on all new hires until after October because we had done the budget, we'd approved the budget, and then we had some concerns about some of our revenue numbers. And we weren't certain that we were actually gonna be able to make those numbers, and we didn't want to spend these funds until we were sure about it. So I think it was October, if you recall, we came and we actually brought a budget opening back to the council, and we made some adjustments. After we had done those reviews, at that point, that is when we opened it back up to new hires. At that point, for the parks, they were going into their winter season, and they chose to hold off until later. And then there was some miscommunication as to who you can actually hire now. So that is what all went into their particular delay.
Mike, one question on your water, on connection fees, is that any new connection? What do we charge a connection fee on? What is that revenue?
That's $225 is what we charge per residential connection, and that just covers our cost of the water meter. And
So that is charged on every,
new home,
okay, just new homes
just
then.
new homes.
Why are we showing such a reduction in that if we feel that our building level is gonna hold or increase?
That's one I don't think we adjusted. It's based off of how many new permits.
Well, did we cut counts from last year? We cut back building permits off of what we
Part of those building permits
budgeted
have,
for last year off of
correct,
that.
part of those building permits
Okay.
have been cut back from, and that's based upon forecast. It's not expected that we will be at the same level.
You don't think we're gonna keep building this way?
Well, I could side with you all the time on this, and believe me, I pushed Drew on this issue too, but Drew also has some feelings with regards to some entitlement issues and other things with lands that he just feels it may not be quite as strong.
Okay.
And we kind of,
325 building permits?
yeah, it was,
What did you budget off of last year? 4?
I can't remember.
2 something.
Yeah, I don't think it was that high.
So if we're going 3 this year, then,
Last year it was like 280, I think, is what.
so we budgeted
But
off
when we
280 last
readjusted-
year, and this year we're going off
Did that
3.
get readjusted when we adjusted?
Let's see here. 335
So we should be
Last
up.
this
So
year.
So we should be up.
I don't know, we'll look at that.
Yeah, look at that one, because you're cutting it by 10,000 instead of growing it by 10,000.
And which fund are you talking about,
The
Councilman Turner?
water enterprise revenue, water operating fund, on just the connection fees. See, last year we budgeted 53,000. This year we're at 43,000, so we're cutting it by 10,000, 10.5, 20% cut. And if we're budgeting for more, it should go up than down. See, I'm looking out for you.
That's why we have these discussions.
Mike, while we're talking about you, can I ask why all of a sudden you have uniforms in your department? We haven't had that before.
We actually added the line item this year. We covered that under equipment supplies,
Okay,
but this year we actually went to a full-on uniform for the departments. Before that, we supplied the orange shirts. We paid them for pants. But if you see those guys, they just look so professional now. They've got the Washington City logo in their name, and that's now required.
So this is just, we're just purchasing the uniforms, we're not laundering them or
It
anything?
is a service.
It's full service, it's everything?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's, every department has them, and they actually have a different color for the different departments, but
So you do shirt and pant, full uniform?
shirt and pants. And it's not a lot of cost over and above. I think it
I was gonna
was,
say, what was your,
I think we estimated it's costing us about $35 a year extra over what we did prior to that, and the guys had to launder their own and
35 per employee?
per employee.
I think it's nice when you're
Well, they look
working-
good, yeah. they
Well,
do
and the
look-
nice
so
thing about
dirty
the
and
laundry
dirty.
service is they do such a good job at cleaning, especially with our, like our street employees. They'll get the asphalts and the oils and
Yeah.
those orange shirts, and it just doesn't come out. Plus, wives arguing about bringing those home. The
Mhm.
laundry service, American Linen, they do a very good job of getting those stains out of those clothes, and as well as repairing them. We just have to tag them, they repair them.
You see, it kind of lends to a little more teamwork and continuity with what they're
Very,
doing
very
too.
much so. We did it with the mechanics in the shop originally, and it worked out so well with them that we just did it across the board with Public Works.
I like the idea.
But I mean, they just look so
They hit
professional
electric
out
and
there
thought that
now.
was what we were off course, but I've gone too far. Couldn't find it.
No, I hear you.
Apparently, we have uniforms now.
Yes, you do.
All of us.
No,
Sure about
I
Guys
don't.
turn them into the laundromat?
We like this Hunter Orange. Apparently, we like Hunter Orange in this city.
You like the Denver Broncos?
No, we do not.
BYU blue and Denver orange.
Well, we're continuing to go through it.
So this meeting then tonight, is this more to talk about operational budget, or is this kind of the last big hurrah on all puzzle pieces?
Yeah,
This is-
really,
this
you've
is
got
the
it all in
meeting.
front of you.
Where if you
So
need to
really
ask
what
all your
we're looking at
questions.
then is some general direction, because what we'll do next week is we'll come with a balanced budget based upon your recommendations or majority recommendations, however it may end up tonight, next week with the proposed tentative budget. And then what will happen is, just so you know, once the tentative budget is adopted, that just basically notifies the public. You then schedule a public hearing, which is scheduled 2 weeks after that, which is on our schedule. It doesn't have to be, but ours is scheduled for 2 weeks after that. There can be changes, and you do not have to rehear it during the time of the tentative budget to the final budget.
Yeah?
And then the final budget just needs to be adopted by, I think, the 25th of June or something like that.
But if you wait to bring up your big concerns next week, Roger
Yeah,
and
it'll be
Kimberly
too
are
late.
gonna be
It'll
a
be
little
too
miffed
late.
at
Okay,
ya.
so this is something
I've
that
heard
I,
one before.
Well, we stay until they're resolved.
on the capital budget on police, with the police building design and architectural, we have 75,000 for this next budget year.
Yeah, and we're anticipating that half of that would come in a grant
Okay.
through CIB.
Okay. What I would like to see in conjunction with that is, I know there's been, we're not sure exactly where the building would be built yet, but the placement of a police station would also be a good opportunity to do a complete kind of site plan for Veterans Park and kind of the adjacent. So I would like to see maybe even the architect and the landscape architect that Barry's worked with in the past, I would like them to come and assist in that architectural design, but to incorporate the whole Veterans Park and Square, and maybe to get a whole idea of how this complex will ultimately look and feel, rather than just jump into a straight police station. So I would feel more comfortable with the police station, knowing what context it will fit within this whole couple of blocks of area. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on that or not, but.
I don't know that you'd want to pay for an I think what this council probably would say, we want a design that looks traditional, sandstone or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, but what I'm talking about is a site plan. So we look at from a top-down, bird's eye view as, for example, we may end up with the old church here at some point. Well, how do we envision that property with the original rock church and then the updates later? How do we envision that to look later?
Just give it to the
Where
youth
where does the police station fit? Where's the parking gonna be? Where do all these things fit? And so I don't
Well, I
think
would
that's a
think that's
big,
something that we would want to discuss before we ever went into site plan.
Yeah, I agree.
That may be something that we want to get on Google Earth and look at it here and say, how do we envision this thing?
But what I'm saying is, in conjunction with these preliminary architectural drawings, I don't think that's too much to ask that that be incorporated into the drawings, the actual site plan that incorporates more than just the footprint where the police station, but these few blocks.
No, the 75 is mostly just the building itself, right? The structure itself, not necessarily even where it sits, or does it include where it sits?
No, well, you're not gonna be spending a lot on site planning, but it's, whatever would be involved for construction grade drawings.
Because I like Chris's idea from a long way out, but I worry we don't own the church yet. We don't know what's gonna happen with the Nison's building, and a lot of that stuff, I don't even want to spend a lot of money planning until I know what the private people do with the private stuff. I'd love to see a revamp of Veterans Park, but I'm not sure I'm ready to invest a lot of money into revamping just the image or the concept if we don't have a little more clarity on what's gonna happen with some of
Well,
that.
where would we build the building then? Let's start with that question. Where would the police station go?
Well, always we've anticipated in the piece of ground we own, right next door.
Community garden.
Because we own two sides of it, so we'd set it facing 100 east.
Yeah, I
replace
don't know
the
if we ever
community garden.
we actually had two concepts. We had, and we've not fixed on either of these. We either had the concept of putting it over there with parking or connecting to this building, which this building was somewhat constructed. In just some rough conversations with people who know what they're doing with respect to that, I think their recommendation is this would be a little bit more problematic connecting it to the building than just putting it on a separate piece. We certainly, the only thing we were interested in is not having to spend money on purchasing ground.
Are we planning on selling the existing station to apply towards the new?
And that's certainly an
Yeah, good
option.
question.
That's certainly an option. Yeah, that was one of them that I looked at and thought we could, and if we, let's say we did it for the price we paid for it, that'd be about $800,000. Now, whether that's valid today or not, I couldn't comment to that, but that's an option. We actually did look at that, help defray some of the costs.
Well, the question is, what would we use it for otherwise? What would we use that
Well,
building
I think
for?
if Washington City continues to grow, which I think if you're gonna have to decide if you think Washington City's gonna grow or not, you know.
Now, this police building, you're gonna put the courthouse in that as well, right?
Well, I mean, we can, but our anticipation at this point is, depending, the more we cut it down in cost, and again, I think we might be still a little high there, the more we will not do that. The more we cut square footage out to try, so I guess my point is if we're trying to build this most economical as possible, then no, we would not move the courts.
Yeah,
And yes, we would sell the building. We'd make it as economical as we could.
Do you think the courts are gonna stay as a, what's the term for our?
As a local court. as a
Yeah,
local
correct.
court.
I mean, you talked about maybe the state.
Well, I can tell
I
you.
mean, I certainly think if they're gonna stay there,
Justice court.
and we say Washington City's gotta grow, you've gotta certainly plan for that growth.
There will always
can't
be
keep doing
justice
what it's doing.
courts. I think the trend is gonna be they're gonna keep increasing the number, so right now, you gotta be 10,000 or below. My feeling is someday that'll be 15, and someday it'll be 20, that's kind of been
So
the
you think
trend.
justice court is gonna be a court of the future?
There will always be a justice court. The district court's getting nothing but busier and
Yeah.
So we
slower.
certainly better plan for
Well,
that
wait a
growth
minute.
then.
But
The
the
question
difference is,
is-
we can, if we do not have to have a justice court.
Yeah, the question
Oh,
is,
you
do
let
we wanna
the-
do our
Do we
own
stay
traffic
in
Washington
citation?
County.
If we pulled out,
Or do
they'd
we
have
send
to be
everybody
served
over to
by the county justice court.
Well,
Okay.
and we only run it one night a week, right?
Mhm.
There's,
It'll expand.
yeah,
It'll expand by nights.
yeah.
That's where, so as far as court space right now, that doesn't concern me nearly. What's gonna happen first is you're gonna see expansion of nights.
Right.
Okay.
So you're not gonna see a real need for.
So there
huge
isn't a
square
need for
footage.
growth as
No.
far as bigger
No,
facilities?
we looked, originally, when we first looked at the police station, we said, wouldn't it be nice because your bailiff situation and all that's right there. But when we are also trying to look at what's the most cost-effective then, but when you say, because what we would
My
do,
thought is, that would give us space to grow
absolutely,
administratively.
and that is
If you can-
correct, that's the
If you
trade-off.
can have a space there that can be used during the day,
You're right.
and then you can convert it into a courtroom space as needed. Anyway, that was just my thought.
Yeah, and
We're
that's,
still
again,
just planning the.
and
Not
part of the-
evidence though, right? Not an evidence room, probably not.
Well, and part of the challenge too with the courts is is
Safe
the-
traveling.
the requirements we have with the courts too, because even structurally, we have requirements with court that doesn't make it as flexible as we want it to be because of the court administrator's office. But again, our initial thoughts were it did make some sense to locate the court within a building, but that does constitute more square footage in a new building. And if that's not the direction we want to go, but still see another option then would be the council could say, well, we'll keep the court here. We'll build just a station just big enough to deal with the police growth, not court growth, but police growth. And then maybe we will keep this building over here for the expansion of general governmental services. That's an option too. Whether that's the appropriate option or not, I'm not saying. I'm just saying there's lots of options that we can put on the plate here as we try.
So what's been discussed with the property, between 100 and 200 North on Main Street, where the yard is now? Is that going to be a parking lot? Is that what the plan would be then?
On 100, say that
So-
again.
Right here,
above
the
the
full, the
yard.
other side of the lot.
On Main Street,
The park's old.
Oh, it would, more than likely, we have to add parking.
So
So
that
you're
would
gonna have a
become just-
building and parking lot that's probably gonna take a good portion of this through
See,
block.
one time the discussion from previous councils, like,
Or
we looked
community
at
garden.
actually a parking structure
Yeah.
to service our walkable downtown, which obviously we've kind of looked at and said, probably.
And that's what we do, so let's say if we expanded this building, of course, you're wiping out all the parking then. And then that would become more parking if you did it this way, because you'd have to accommodate for that.
because I'm still getting some comments about just a little bit of the dust and stuff up there too, so.
Yeah.
So,
We tried to get the wind to stop blowing.
on-
Where the park's yard
It's
is.
just raining. It's a stormwater problem. We can't have any runoff, so.
When do we anticipate the $50,000 payment to Siemens? Is that in this budget coming up, or is it in the existing budget?
Well, it depends on what you do with that. If you choose not to pursue any,
You just gotta pay them the 50 for doing the audit.
but that gets rolled into the project costs if you move forward with a project. If you say, thanks, we don't want to do any project, then there's a $50,000 fee.
Do we have that budgeted
We
in
do
here
not.
anywhere?
We probably ought to show that.
Somewhere, yeah.
Didn't we already spend that, Siemens 50?
No,
Not at all.
Well, we spend it, we haven't budgeted, we
we
haven't
haven't
paid it.
budgeted.
So we
Yeah,
told
you
them-
committed to
You
it. You haven't
committed
spent
to
it, you
it.
committed to it. And they're here next week. They're here for your 90% review next week.
I've been wondering about them.
Well, they've been hitting their milestones, but, and matter of fact, you'll remember at the 60% review, Mark came in and said, here's where we're at, we're at the 60%. 90% is where the rubber hits the pavement for you guys next week.
Shifting gears back to budgets.
Yeah.
Talk about our storm drain. We've got an extra salary, 80% salary increase? What do we got going on there?
We just did more true cost allocating, putting Lester's and Ross's salaries into stormwater, where they're spending a lot more of their time in there. Where Lester's been broke out through water, sewer, streets.
So we should see a reduction
In the other funds.
in
there'll
those
be
other funds to
reductions.
offset that.
Right, it's not a new employee, it's just more true
Okay,
cost.
just in the salary portion of it then, okay.
I promise you, the personnel are the easy ones to move around because they are directly.
What's,
I mean, with the
you've got a
exception of
huge,
2%.
and I probably could go down and find I did not, in your professional and technical, what project are we,
We're presently working on the stormwater master plan. And,
the
We actually-
stormwater master plan?
but that's in this year, what you're looking at is $98,000 going to the flood control authority. And that's one thing I want to talk to Kimberly about. We probably shouldn't have it in professional technical. Maybe set up a separate line
Is
item.
this the revenue discussion that Mike had about passing on the flood control?
No,
That's
this is our flood control authority fees.
It's for a project we're doing through the authority, or
No, it's,
fees to
we
the
pay
authority?
that $2.
So you're showing
Mine's
that,
just coming from
the-
our. from
because
our-
last year we didn't show that budget going out because it was not.
Wasn't there.
It
We
wasn't
had
there.
collected the revenues off of it, but we didn't show the expense side of that because it wasn't there.
Correct.
Okay,
Well, and the revenues are still just part of the $5, isn't it?
yes.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
just-
so the revenues have always been.
Yeah, the revenues were
We
there.
just have less to work with.
So what we'll see when we have our budget opening, you'll see that true up through our budget opening for this year's budget. And then, of course, this will be ongoing 2014 budget, right?
Well, I don't know, true up. I mean, it's
you
a
had any
new cost that
expenses
we've
this year?
never
Well,
had
we certainly,
before.
yeah, but we've had expenses this year in our 2013 budget that weren't part of that budget.
Correct.
And so
flood
during the budget,
control.
so during the budget opening, we'll true that up.
We'll true that up for this year.
Correct, for
Yes,
2013, and
yes,
then this will
yes.
be 2014 going
Yes,
forward.
you're correct.
How much did you have on flood control costs this year?
Well, it's a dollar
Per connection.
per connection.
No, it's more than that.
Per
We went
buck
to
and a half.
Buck and a half.
Oh, that's right, you're just paying, it's just pass through, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but that's where the big money is. It's $98,125.
All right. Special departmental supplies, what are you buying?
Special things.
That's like ID tags for the storm drains, because we have to label and tag every storm drain with ID tags as well
Are we
as
gold plating
little-
the ID tags?
Well, there are also the little stickers that have to go on them that says flow to the river,
That fish picture?
expo booth, any of our operation and maintenance supplies that we use in the stormwater, and our public education and outreach. Those are all line items in special
Alright.
department
I
supplies.
said I probably could find them there. I just didn't,
You'd rather
and
me
then
tell
you,
you.
well, and then you've got, I guess that 350,000 in your impact fee expense is your master plan?
Those, that's 3650 South Trunk Line is
Okay.
one of our projects. And then just, we always put
So we are
some-
gonna do a project this year then?
Yes. And then we also put money in for upsizing lines, and we're actually presently looking at upsizing lines with a developer that will do the steeplechase.
Steeplechase. All right. You did good.
See, he could've looked him up, but he wanted to
Hold
put
up.
you on the
That's
hot
right,
spot.
exactly.
Hold up, Mike, I got a question for you. You told him that the salaries are up in storm drain because we dropped them in the other departments because of those guys, but we also dropped them in other departments because of the shop. And so we're increasing between the storm and the shop 70,000, but we've cut 25, 38, 40,000. So we're up 30.
Well, I think you need to look at the whole allocation. I can promise you, though, there is, the only adjustments that you're seeing upwards on any, when you net it all out, is the 2%.
It's just the raises, so that's
Yes.
what it would be.
But
That's
you'd have
probably
to
where
look
it
at
would
the
be.
allocation all across.
That's
the
probably
board.
what it would be, huh? Just the 2% increase in wages. Okay. Sorry, as I was looking at the numbers,
Are
they
we
just didn't
talking
add
about
up.
this
I was like,
reclassification? So it says Public Works, Public Safety Power and GS have some minimal adjustments due to certification or duty changes.
Yeah, and the only
In many
ones-
cases, the adjustment have been needed for several years, total cost $34,339. Is that what we're talking?
I
on
don't
some of
think
those
that's what Councilman Hudson was specifically
wasn't what I was
talking
saying.
about.
No.
And the only classifications we've got shown in this particular budget is a public works reclassification. That's the only one. We took all the others out at this point.
Can I get a clarification on our police department, on what, how that worked?
On the salaries?
Yeah, it was,
Let's have Kimberly. Kimberly, can you address that? Would you discuss, please, this is a budget issue. This is a misbudgeting issue, and that's
Can
why
you
it looks so
repeat the
weird, the
question?
police department. Police department
Oh, the
wages.
police department wages?
yeah,
Okay, so with our public safety departments, because of the shifts that they work, they actually receive holiday pay in addition to their annual salary.
okay.
We had not previously budgeted that, so if you were to go back and look at actuals compared to budget in prior years, we kept going over. So that was one of the things that Ruth and I sat down and said, why are these two departments, why do we go over budget, what's going on? And so for the police department, that's roughly $55,000 is what that cost gets associated with. One of the other things that we budgeted for separately this year, and this would be across the board for any department, we looked at anyone who had done like vacation buyouts. You know, we have our limit on the amount of vacation you can accrue, and there's a cap on that. And so any department who had an employee who bought out and has historically been buying out, we made sure to fund for that as well.
So, tell me
Those are
what a
small
vacation
numbers, though.
buyout is.
Vacation buyout would be, when your anniversary date rolls around, you're not allowed to carry over more than 80 hours a year.
Okay,
If you have more than 80 hours a year, you can buy down to that 80 up to a maximum of 40. I mean, you can't ever buy out more than 1 week's worth of vacation.
so we cash them out,
And so
basically.
you buy it
And
out.
part of the reason we do that
Otherwise-
is because more and
because
more
we
anymore,
can't let 'em
we're
take the
denying
time off.
them the ability to take their,
Right.
because they just can't, we can't
So we,
let them go.
yeah. So that, I mean, that total amount on the
Actually,
buyout
that's
is
been a
not
policy for
No,
significant.
it's-
Citywide, it might be around $10,000
Yeah, it
at
wasn't
most.
huge, but I noticed
But
it on
the
there that I
hu-
hadn't seen it
The
before.
public safety one is, and it only affects those two departments, but their holiday pay is in addition to their regular, so.
Kimberly, Chief Hafen has left, or else I'd ask him this question. I know that in the process of hiring new firefighters, one of the discussions that was had was the ability to train together because of some budget constraints. Has that been addressed as part of this budget?
I
When we
believe,
talk about paying,
yeah, let me tell you how I think that we've addressed that, and I hope this is correct. We can confirm this with Chief Hafen. We are shifting our scheduling in the fire department to what's known as a Kelly shift, and some of the coverage will be modified slightly out of Station 62. And I think that in that modified schedule out at Station 62, that because we're reducing some of the commitment there, we're picking up some of this that you're referring to, and that is getting the training together.
Yeah.
Because the way we had to do it before, as you know, is in order to get Station 62, we didn't have the budget to then allow them also to train together. because it created.
Correct, that created an overtime or
I
something. I
believe
know
that
that there
he-
were some
I
hours
believe he
with our
talked
part-time
about
employees that,
wanting to use, in that particular instant, when it was involving full-timers, that they would receive comp time to come into training, and that he was going to have them try to take that same time off within
yeah,
the 20 days.
as I understood, it was
and-
more dealing with our
so.
part-time guys because they were only
They're gonna
allowed
be
to train
limited.
one night a month with them, and so we were seeing our training diminish drastically. And
Our
I know
part-timers
there
are
was
gonna
some
be limited
discussion
to the
about.
weekly,
Yeah, now you're gonna, you
Limit, 25
compounded
hours
that
a
problem
week.
even this year with the Affordable Care Act.
I know that, and that's, like
And
you say,
that
that's-
we won't, so there's gonna be, but I believe to answer your question, the
I think
short
he
answer
worked
to
it
your
out.
question is I
Is you've
believe
looked
Chief
at it?
Hafen
Worked
is
it
working
out.
on getting that training, no matter how he has to adjust it.
Okay,
to
I
Get that
just,
training collective.
Is that why the overtime went up a little in that
the
department?
overtime went up a little because we have 6 full-time firefighters that will receive overtime,
Mhm.
and versus only 3 before. So if they work their regular shift that they're always scheduled for, it's automatic that they'll receive a certain amount of overtime every year. Meaning that, I don't want to get, I can go over the whole Kelly Lake.
No,
And I
it's
can,
okay.
Kelly shift and
it's
explain
a
how it all works.
built-in overtime.
But basically, we were $8,000 before, now we're roughly 16. It's
Right.
doubling because we have
Okay.
double the employees.
Yeah, what you'll
Short
see with the,
sentence.
the fire department has had a fairly significant increase because of changes we made.
Correct. And that's why I knew that there was some budget constraints prior, and it had affected the ability of that department to function together because of it. And I thought if there's any way we can try and fund that so that at least their training's together, which was a huge part of that department, certainly we need to try and do that, so. Okay.
This will be a fun department, as because we got some, you talk about a community center too, we've got a growing into the fire department too. I mean, Chief Hafen will tell you right now that the number of full-time that really Washington City has right now is at the same level St. George was at 40,000 population. And now there's some differences that have occurred since then, and we all recognize that. Volunteerism is a little harder to come by than back in those days. But even Chief Hafen will tell you that there's some growing into our department that we need to do, and we'll just have to pick up the cost until we grow in.
A quick question for you on kind of your summary here. It says we are currently showing a balance of $92,395 in the general fund. This will be eliminated before the presentation of the tentative budget by either reducing the fund balance or adding a requested additional to personnel. We leave this to the council's discretion. What?
So that's
You mean
exactly
that?
the discussion we're having right now with respect to, so using the same fund balance from last year and making all the cuts that we've done, and with the proposals we're giving you, so the 2%, the higher here and the higher there, that we still show a positive amount in the general fund of $92,000. And we kind of left it like that. Kimberly says, what do you want to do with that? And I said, let's leave it for the council to look at, and we'll have a discussion like we have had tonight. And then the council could say, no, we want that $92,000 going back to the fund balance, reducing that. We would like to pick up a couple more people, whatever.
Instead of drawing 346,000 into
You
fund
take
balance,
92 off.
you go into the 250 or whatever.
Correct.
252.
But we wanted to show that, but next week we can't show that. So we'll have to slot it some way or another.
Or that could cover the employee increases.
Well, we've got,
Increases are
Not gonna win
budgeted
that.
the
in.
increases are in the proposed budget. It could cover, for instance, you could say, I do want to pick up, for instance, do you have that paper that I handed you? For instance, one of the scenarios I threw out is what if we took these other requested personnel and didn't hire them until January versus a July start? And you could pick up all those, and that's a cost of $47,000. With the
Short of the police officers, you're just talking about.
yeah, and I'm talking about one each too right now. I'm not counting the numerous. So one police
HR.
officer, the part-time HR, the part-time utility billing, and one IT guy or IT person for half a year instead of a full year, that amounts to $47,000.
But then we end up locked into it in the next year, and we still have kind of a,
Well, you're right, but it gives you a whole year to evaluate that, though, and you kind of can grow into it a
but
little
it seems like
differently.
we don't ever really reduce personnel or reduce expenses. The best we do sometimes, like we're doing right now, is holding from the prior year's budget, right?
Well,
We reduce
So
it.
even if we get them at halfway through the year, we're still not gonna get rid of
Yeah,
them after a
I-
year, and if we don't have the revenue coming in.
Yeah, I'd say historically, the last 5 years, the answer is yes, we have reduced personnel. Not tons.
Oh, just through attrition more, I remember. Okay,
Well, yeah, because we shrunk departments, we
okay.
attritioned some
But
out.
typically not new hires, you
Well,
would.
typically, we won't when we have a population growth like we do. Typically, the trend would be you're gonna have to add
But
some people
but again, we
somewhere.
gotta come back to, though, we still need sales tax revenue.
We still need some tax revenue, so the only reason I
That's
throw this
really
out
the-
here, the only reason I throw this out here is I said, here's a scenario you could consider. That's why we wanted to show the 92,000, so the council could say, you know what? We're fine holding, let's say this council said, we're fine holding the same fund balance as we did last year. We think if it keeps us at 18%, we're fine with that. So now what do you want to do with the 92? That's what I,
But you're saying, though, it's not out of the norm to dip into fund balance in some years and build fund balance in
That's
other
what
years,
the
and
floor is.
that's kind of what it's.
yeah, the fund balance levelizes your services. See, if fund balance wasn't allowed, you'd be doing a bust and boom town. Because when the economy was up, you could hire these people, and then when the economy goes down the very next year, they'd have to go, even though the services may still be there. So what it does, it helps levelize. And it's not great at 18%,
So let's say we
but it
tap
does.
into, we tap into it 346,000, we still have what then? How much in our general fund as reserved that can't be touched? Or that can't be touched without a rebudget opening or whatever? Don't we have more money? I mean, we
That
have.
can't be touched, you have to maintain 5%. That's the amount that cannot be
Okay,
touched.
so, but how much would we
Our-
have? Let's say we adopt this budget and tap in 346,
with the
how
full
much is left?
340, we'd have 18% left.
So
Which
of
has
12
been,
million.
until this year,
of
was the
18%
maximum
of
amount
12
we
million?
could. And so, it's a one, I'll tell you the exact number.
So what,
1.5 million?
And I can tell you right now that even if the council sets the policy, we want to be at 25%,
It would be
I would absolutely not recommend that all in 1 or 2 years. You
Okay,
build
so we
that
do have
over
a
time.
savings account.
Yeah,
That we're saying, don't touch it.
yes.
That's right.
And in terms of don't touch it, the policy the council had previously set was 15%. We don't want to touch 15% unless we were really in dire straits.
And the
But we're
council
still,
can make
but
those.
we'd still, even dipping into 346,000, we'll still maintain 18%.
We'd still be maintaining.
We'd still be maintaining 18%.
I thought it was a little under 18, if you dipped in, it was like 17.
Well, it will depend on, when I did these
Depends on
numbers, it's gonna depend on how 2013 ends up.
And if you put
So
your
it's based on our
50,000
current year-end
savings-
estimate that we
Right
have.
around there, huh?
And if
Yeah.
we continue to tweak the general fund, I mean, those are some rolling numbers until next week. But yeah, you should be at 18%.
So I actually like that the council's a really conservative council that says, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to touch that. But again, there's a strong philosophy out there of cities that say, we know what our rainy day fund's going to be. We're going to peg it at that, and then we're going to let that money continue to work for the community in one form or another.
The only scare I have with personnel is that once you get those, and I even fear with this with the SAFER grant too, is that in 3 years, we're gonna be picking up $250,000 there. And on other new hires, I understand we need police officers, but police officers are the most expensive to hire because of the pension, because of the equipment and everything. So it really scares me although how important, I think they're very important. A part-time's not as tough because there's just not the
Part-time
strings.
And part-time works better for us in fire. Part-time doesn't really work at all in law enforcement for the most part. But you're right. Every bit of that is correct. Public safety across the board is expensive. Public safety in many cities represents 65 to 70% of their budget. And we're not there.
I think some cities are privatizing that right now.
Well,
They,
if somebody come knocking on my door, and if your citizens would accept it, but right now I'm not sure that those are, the challenge that we find in Washington County is we're Washington County. We're not Chicago, we're not LA, we're not any of those things, and so you maybe have somebody say, this is a great entrepreneurial idea, I'm gonna start my own police force, and if they do well, you did good as a council. If they do not do well, your citizens would let you
But that
awful quick.
brings us back to what Councilman Turek said. I kind of think it's a novel idea. How do we at least investigate that a little bit? I don't think a decision
Absolutely.
we can make
Absolutely.
between now and next week, but it is a novel idea with
It is.
privatization of, in fact, I think Councilman Segler talked to me about a city that all their services were privatized.
in Florida.
Or was it you, Councilman Johnson?
I'd be how do they get revenue on a police force like that?
Well, they do it like they probably still do, you know, a combination somewhere between
You don't get
here
pulled
with
over
us.
often enough. You're pretty nervous when you get pulled over, and you're willing to, you're willing to deal.
That's Springdale.
You need to get pulled over more often.
Well, okay. And I jumped too quick, because I have no idea. I have never yet, and it's only because I haven't looked, I'm sure they're out there, but I can tell you that a privatized police department is such a rarity that I've never even come
Yeah,
across.
well,
The
that's-
city
I
in,
was
the city in
thinking that.
Florida, actually, they contracted out to their county, or one
Well,
of
yeah,
the
we tried-
neighboring
we
cities.
tried
you
to
got
do
a
that too. We
unified
found
police
out.
force.
They did it
more,
like
you
Santa
got
Clara did with
metros.
Ivans, is what they did.
But I have never seen a
And so
fully
some of it is
private
they-
police
Yeah, to me,
department
I
ever.
couldn't understand it, because where do the revenues, how do you
Yeah.
I mean,
That they've contracted with other neighboring
yeah, I could see
municipalities.
contracting, I could see that, but I couldn't see it privatizing, because it's like, where do you generate a revenue source?
Yeah, you can privatize an inspector. but
Exactly, so, I mean, inspectors you can't, because you're not,
I just don't know how you get people to respect a private cop pulling them over.
well, and then, yeah. And, yeah, I need revenue, so I'm gonna go out, I mean, we got accused of that with our,
Quotas.
with our,
What was that? Bill Blart? Is that the guy's, the mall cop dude?
Paul Blart.
Paul Blart. We could put him on a
That was a
Segway.
terrible movie.
What lease revenue went down at the community center?
Let me think. I could maybe remember
Went
that.
from 42.1 last year to 37.5 this year.
The lease revenue? No.
I thought we had struck a new lease, there was an increase.
Well, we did, and that's represented in there, but,
Yes, that's under the pool.
yeah. That one was
This
definitely
is
up.
the rentals, WCC rentals, lease rentals, lease revenue.
oh,
Barry, do you know precisely?
is it the rentals? If it's the rentals,
To another line item? Do you know, Kimberly?
I'd have to look into it. I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know that they're showing the new swimming pool lease revenue for the team in the aquatics. And the old lease revenue was not shown in aquatics before.
I think that's where,
So I'm
I think
thinking
that's
it's
the
a
change.
shift.
27,000 or something.
What's that account number that you got right in front of you?
I'm looking at 6901, and the line number is 29-69-6901-3496.
You know, and you're the type of person that calls me on the phone, leaves a voicemail, that you rip off your 9-digit number that quick. Do that again, just a little slower.
29
Yeah,
dash 69
yeah,
dash 6901
okay.
dash 3496. I hate voicemail. I don't think I've left a voicemail in years.
Well,
I hang up
from
every
the
time
way
I
you've
do
done
that.
that, I'm kinda
You just have
glad.
to call him back.
For some reason, it just bothers me. I don't do it.
Just call him back.
Come over to my house, you can listen to a bunch.
Maybe
Well, since we're getting into the community center, can I
I've got
ask a
too
couple
many,
questions?
attorney's offices that never reply.
We, is that okay?
absolutely.
Wait. In our, community center, we have, where's it at, sorry? In salaries, we have increased our center operations. It's not a huge amount, but 13,000, then our rock wall's going up 5. These are percentages that are higher than just the 2% that we discussed for wage increases.
I think what they were doing is they're taking contract staff and rolling them into part-time.
Mhm.
And so now the salaries looks higher because they used to have those ones as just contracted labor.
So that came, okay.
Is that
what it
right?
is?
Kimberly?
It is for the rock hall one, though. I do know that they have a rock wall. I'll have to look at the actual, they have a rock wall tenant person or coordinator that's in there that was previously paid for like out of operations or something. And now
Okay.
it's slotted specifically for the rock wall.
See, but like,
That was one of
so
those.
when I look at operations,
Right.
it's gone up, the salaries, but then contracted labor stayed
Yeah.
fairly flat. And if we pulled that out to go to Rockwall,
I know, I worked with Wendy extensively, so I gotta find
I'm sure.
my notes from when we reviewed all this the other day. Let's see.
And then under the regular fund, I had a question on why their benefit costs increased so much.
I'm gonna sit down for a minute. If you wanna
You're
ask
okay.
something else, I'll come
Okay.
back.
Roger, I know we had discussed this in our committee meeting, about the best estate programs. I think I wasn't quite sure until I realized that we're spending money to be involved in the best estate programs. I think personally, it's time that we just say thank you for giving us an award every year.
What
But
are we paying
I
on
think,
Best Estate? I know we're not traveling up to really.
well, they budgeted $1,000 to travel, and then to enter, it's $125.
Who's traveling anymore? I said, who's traveling anymore? How many people?
7 or 8.
Okay. Well, I don't think you probably need, even if you don't do that, I don't think you need 7 or 8, probably.
Yeah, I'm not, these are small numbers when you look at the entire budget, but sometimes that's what we can affect.
Quite frankly, my feeling on that whole thing, honestly, I'd keep the 125 to put into it, and I'd send one up if you want it, because I do think it's great notoriety, but I don't think 8 people need to go up year after year.
I agree, the reason there's so many issues because the reason there's more this year is because you have parks and community center,
Oh, they both won.
and they're both one, so it's.
Wait, you were over both, right?
Yes.
That's
And
fun.
Barry, I mean, he looks great in the tux.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Trophies
that's
and what
quite,
you
and I don't have a problem with that if in the future we just.
Well,
Or we send the mayor. He's over both too.
Councilman Hudson, you remember my comment.
I know, and I agree. I sometimes worry that we spend a lot of time focusing on these things, and
Well, the one thing about the Best Estate, I will give them, to submit the application anymore, with the exception of $125, is almost nothing, because we're duplicating it
Yeah.
year in and year out. I would agree with you for sure with respect to the travel issue, because I went there once, the first year, and that satisfied me for a great many years to come. And I'm sure Barry feels the same way a little bit. but-
We can actually do one, that's not a problem at all. But I think that the Best Estate really markets our community center. It really, for what we pay into that, I think we get a lot more back, money-wise, than what we put into it, for
Yeah,
sure.
you seem to see a lot of people from up north too come down, and when they travel.
Oh, we get your name out, it's a big
hot
thing.
spot to come and check it out, and.
Yeah.
So
I think
$125 I could support, but I'd
okay.
bring
And we don't have a problem with that. We can bring that down and not, but I think the Best Estate is a prestigious award, and it does get the name out, and it's a great it's great for marketing. Marketing dollars alone is well worth what we get into, what we get back from it.
Hey, Barry, before you sit down while you're there, just looking at your revenues, your anticipated revenues off of your aquatic side of things, specifically in your youth swim and your adult swim, are those pretty trued up numbers? I mean, you're talking of growing it $4,000 from $23,000 to $27,000 for your youth,
That's one of
Yes.
our big ones this year, though.
and your adult swim your adult swim is staying at 2,000.
Yeah, we have we have the numbers, we have the email.
So
from
you're
Ben.
trued
It's-
up off
it's
of
true-
those
yeah,
things?
it's right on.
Okay,
I'll
that's,
tell you, one of the things
all
that
been
Ben has
calculated.
done a great job with, when we hired Ben said, you gotta just get bodies in the water, and he has done a fantastic job.
oh, that's like I say, yeah, as long as they're trued up number, that's my biggest concern, is we don't pie in the sky some of
No,
these
what
numbers.
you're
They're
gonna
not.
see
They're
this
true.
year is you're gonna see a budget adjustment at the end of this year, fairly substantial on these revenues,
To the positive
to the
side.
positive
Yes.
side.
Yeah, he's
I
brought
like
in
those
brought
kind
in
of
additional
budget
revenue
improvement.
from the.
Yeah, I like the positives.
And then, and that's our expensive side. That's really the most expense of the community center, is that pool side, is the west side, and
Correct.
so the goal is for us to get more people there.
Well, and you
And
might
and
not,
it is, it's happening.
you might not like this thought, but I'm just gonna say it to get it out there, is, on aquatics side, when you're talking about capital projects, if there would be a way to cut that 2 million and 2 million and still get what we want down at Sullivan, I wouldn't mind seeing, an outdoor, 50-meter pool at the community center. Yeah, you know, you can do it, say what you will, but, we're talking about bringing people to the community center to increase revenue. I think an outdoor pool, and I think you might be able to take those dollars already in the capital budget and find some grant money and maybe pull something off up there. So I'm just planting a bug, but
You would lose money, and pools don't make money. I don't know if a pool,
I would tell you
Frank,
what you
you
are
should know
doing
pool
though
it
now.
does.
I don't think Ben's gonna be concerned about his 2% if you could approve that. He'd be thrilled to death.
Yes, he
He'd love what you just said. Ben would really love it.
I'm just saying, if you could stretch it to be able to,
there's not a 50-meter pool in this whole area, but it will, I mean, it's,
what do they call, not a 50, what is it? The bigger one, the outside.
it's a 50.
50 meter.
Yeah,
you're
50-meter
25
pool.
indoor.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
is one?
that's what
Is there one up north?
Oh, yeah.
Cedar has one.
SUU.
But they become,
I'll tell you, I've had people
College
approach
does.
me about they want diving
they
boards
become
back.
a big draw, so.
That's what
Hey,
you
we,
want, a diving
when we built the community center, we talked about that, and the pool was gonna cost about twice as much because of the depth of it and everything,
My word, talk about focus.
and then your use gets cut down because when people are diving, you can't use the swim
I
lanes.
tell them we're buying balls so they
So
can walk
it's-
on water
that's-
up there, and
So
it'll be
for-
water walkers.
You know, for 15 people like to dive, you're taking 50 people out for lanes, and it's
Yeah.
costing you twice as much,
But
so.
50-meter pool brings people,
Kimberly was one of them that
brings people
griped about the
down.
diving boards.
Yeah, I don't, hey, if anybody loves diving boards, it's me, but
Yeah.
it certainly didn't make sense in the price and.
I'm a lazy river
Use.
guy. Just
Me
get some
too.
water spinning in a circle and I'll just float
Tell
around.
you. If you can just if you can take
You're bad
that
with
2
that.
million, 2 million, cut down your cost of what we're doing at Sullivan, couple those savings with the grant money, and do a 50-meter pool out there, it'd be awesome.
It would be awesome,
It would be awesome.
but it would cost you over.
So the
Certainly
other
cost you.
question I have
We
then
gotta
is,
think big.
how close are we to, we have an outstanding bond on the community center, right? How close are we to, there's just a little bit left on, how,
Yeah, it's
2018?
4 more years.
2018?
I don't think it's
I don't think it's 2018.
And
It's,
the-
I
and the
don't think it's 2028, but I don't
972,000
think
or
it's
whatever that we're paying for your, does that include that bond payment?
that's more
Kimberly?
finance.
Somebody kissed tonight.
So it's another 15 years.
2028, not 18.
Oh, 20, Kimberly,
was
can you tell me
20-year.
what that bond, what's, about what we owe on that?
I think the face value is 7.
And then,
Just
is the
about enough is
servicing-
Yeah.
top of Main Street.
Is the servicing on that being
Whatever.
paid for,
Not even close.
out of the transfer from general fund to community center
It's
fund, or
covered
that's a
100%
separate?
by park impact fees. That's why we don't have any money to build
Oh,
new
park
parks.
impact fees is what keeps paying for that,
It's about
show you- I can show you the
$562,000 a year.
but park impact fees keep paying for that, so we're just talking on the general fund transfer to community center, it's just operational.
Well, out in the middle
Yes.
of Pearl Junction, you're right.
Exit 13?
Yes, we anticipate, I mean, it was a
10
20-year
million,
note, but
48.
obviously, I
I'll
mean, we
buy it.
anticipated
I'll buy it.
selling some land and paying that off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and at the top of Main Street.
Yeah, and the council recognized that, and I think that's important for you to all understand. That previous council, you can change this, is the Main Street Buena Vista land was pledged to that note.
Right.
What's the balance on that?
I think the
That's
original
just
note was
rough.
7 million, if I
The original note
remember.
was, for the community center only, was like 7.8
Mhm.
million.
It's
and I
probably
can
now
pull
a
up
grand
for you
total
and
of
tell you where we're at.
7.1.
5 years into a 20-year
Into a 20-year.
Yeah,
loan or bond or whatever.
yeah,
We're still paying interest, aren't we?
yeah, it's not gonna be too low.
It seemed to go down this year.
Well, it went down because your interest rate, remember, I brought that up. Your interest rate took a huge hit downwards. It's a good thing. Good day for the community center. Good day that the community center finally got some recognition.
saved how much
In a positive way.
Yes, that's right. When I said 562, that would've been in the old rate, and I think they had almost $100,000 or so savings on that, so.
Reduction, okay. But we can pay that out of impact fee, because that's still a new. Okay.
What type of events are you holding up in your aquatic center that your sponsorships, you're showing your sponsor dollars? What are we looking at there
Revenue, the revenue side.
on the revenue side?
Can you pull that up?
What's your number?
Oh, I don't know.
What's right there to the
Ask
left?
Councilman Sigmund.
6203.
He's good with them, rattling them numbers off. I'm down the expenses side, I left
Page
the
20.
revenues, I looked at that and then.
I was looking up on the detail. Yeah, that's what, I don't have it in front of me. So the Ducky Drop is one of the big ones.
So you're
Yeah.
gonna get more sponsorship in the
Well, we
Ducky
have,
Drop?
we
We have
have one employee that's all he
George
does
now that's doing that.
Correct, yeah, I
And
noticed
he's
that.
on track, he's done pretty well. I mean, he's increased our budget.
Yeah, it's, where was I? $2,000, yeah, you're going to $2,000 sponsorship for your Ducky Drop.
The outstanding debt on the MBA bond for the community center at June 30th was $6,698,000.
Okay, better than I thought.
It is better.
698. Thank you.
Yeah,
Write a check.
under 7 and I'm comfortable.
It won't
6.6.
Get me under 7 million and I could breathe a lot easier at night.
That's your new threshold,
That's my
isn't it?
threshold.
We pushed your new threshold to 7.2.
Did we have any consideration or even any thought on Centram on this budget?
I didn't put anything on the budget, and I'll be honest with you, it didn't even enter my mind when we were putting this together. I came across, that thought came across my mind just the other day, but the answer is no. There is nothing reflected in here, and quite frankly, I haven't taken any step forward either. I probably just need to work with the
Does
council.
anybody have any other thoughts on even, if that's even a discussion to have this year, given our,
I might sell the Covington home and freeze salaries, to free up about 400,000, then we could do it, but I'm not willing to do Suntran at the expense of all the other things. I just don't think we have the money to even consider right now.
okay, I'm just throwing it out. Just
I'll be
How about
honest,
the
I think
mall
that.
bridge?
I have-
We need to continue this discussion, though. We do, and I apologize that I haven't done that.
No, I think that Suntrans is something that we should be involved in. I think it would benefit our downtown immensely. We want to bring people downtown, let's get them a reason to come.
Well, you should start talking
way to
sales
come.
tax dollars, you bring it to Walmart.
Yes, you can offset some things that way. So I think it's a discussion that we really need to look at. Roger and I have talked a little, we've talked a little bit about some ways that maybe we can do it a little more economically than what they
And that's,
what
I
they
think,
suggested.
that's, I
but-
think, what needs to be the first step. I think the first step needs to be kind of what do we want it to look like? And then we can put numbers to it, and then it fits into the budget if it does or it doesn't. Otherwise, I'm not sure I could have even come
Yeah,
up with it
I
quick.
struggle justifying $200,000 this year
Sure.
to bring it
You
into
can-
the city.
I think that
You could have a lot of
Possibly.
limousines take care of that for that fee, so.
You got a lot of
Private
what?
a lot of private taxis would provide better service for the price than that, for the number of people.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. Let's see where that line in the sand is with privatization versus public.
There you go. Yeah, so, I would love to have that in the budget, but I just don't see that that we've talked about it enough that we would do anything with it this year.
You saying that we'll budget money to publicize that we will taxi people from St. George to Washington?
No, I'm saying for $200,000, you could just have a car and pay somebody to go bring them in versus $200,000. And I don't think it's gonna bring that much money, unfortunately, to the tax base, because these are
Well,
typically the people who can't
It'll never
afford
pay
a
for
car to get
itself.
in there.
I
anyway.
agree, it'll never pay for
So,
itself. They
yeah,
don't-
it's not gonna, there'll be a lot of sales tax at Walmart.
I think that when you start looking at these services, I think most communities, even though there might be pockets that are benefited economically, that is not why they're putting these services in. They're putting these services in is that they feel that, again, it's a common good that needs to be taken care of.
Like we do with parks and
Yeah.
things like that.
part of being a community.
And it really is almost part of a wealth, kind of almost a wealth
Welfare.
distribution issue,
A little bit.
so.
I'll tell you, I sat on that, on the on that committee that looks at transportation issues, and it's certainly interesting having some of these conversations, because you see some government at its best and worst, if you want to call it that. They start having discussions about bringing people from rural areas so they can shop in Cedar City or St. George from Kanab, and say, is this really a role of government? And certainly, I mean, you look at it and say there's people that can't afford or aren't able to. And, I know, I sit on there and say, where does government stop and where do we start? And, certainly,
Yeah, the more you take away the incentive from a philosophical point of view of neighbors to help neighbors, and
Correct.
the government's gonna do it all, you know?
yeah, that's,
Next door neighbor knew somebody was an invalid, they can take them shopping, take care of them, it builds
Exactly.
relationships, it builds communities, but if they're gonna say the government's gonna do it, I don't need to know my
yeah,
neighbor.
that was the exact discussion that we had, that I brought up and say, where does friends and family
Well,
come into play
it's tough when you
here?
have people who are invalid and they need to go to the doctor every day, and how can your neighbors do that every day? You know, I have neighbors that we try and help them out, and it becomes
Yeah,
a
it's a burden.
major problem when they have to go for medical treatments every day. Well, most people work during the day, how do you get them there? And it becomes, it's a tough one, you know, because most people are very willing to help out, but it's tough when you have to drive them and wait at the doctor's office for 3 hours and then drive them back home. It becomes a big issue.
Yep.
Noticed you
I
didn't-
didn't see where we put in the budget any Mall Street Bridge.
I noticed you forgot about that one too.
Yeah,
Well, I thought the reality of this budget would resolve that issue.
I can tell you, council members, because of a new call that I have across that river, we've discussed this, that we're gonna put in a lease ferry there at the river temporarily, just to ferry us across the river.
Lee's or a lease?
Well, we're gonna call it the Virgin River Ferry. So, we have a little raft, we can hide it in the tamaracks, and then we'll just raft back and forth across temporarily. Couple pallets and inner tubes.
I'll tell you, to me, what's more important than that, if we really look at this economic development and say this absolutely has to be a high priority for our council in the next 5 or so years, this council needs to start looking at the proper economic development, commercial developments out in the fields, and you are starting to get the density to start address those. And I would look at that well before I would start saying, well, let's just shift the monies over to have them go across the bridge and pick up whatever grocery store is gonna go in there. Again, I'm not opposed to this, and I've actually shot over to St. George that we'd be happy to look at this if they'd consider revenue sharing. At this moment, I haven't gotten a word back from them yet,
Well, and you're not gonna.
and I'm not going to.
I think that it's an important one though, because it directly impacts our Green Springs area.
Directly,
Alleviates that intersection.
That Telegraph and Green Springs intersection.
well, it probably will, and it will still come at a cost, because what they'll do is not hit Walmart, Home Depot, and
Right.
the other ones.
No, we know
Well, but
that.
it certainly will alleviate the millions of dollar projects that UDOT's telling us we have to do, removing businesses
Yeah.
and making some major substantial impacts to commerce
I
at that corner.
yeah, I think it will have some impact, but I think we need to be very,
The problem with that is if it's just shopping traffic, I think we're okay, but we have shopping and transit all getting mixed up in there.
Yeah, to build on what Councilman Sigler is saying is, maybe some of that congestion there isn't necessarily destination shopping at those stores, but it's commuter traffic. And that bridge will free up destination shopping traffic to our commercial centers by sending more commercial or commuter traffic down the other way. Because I still think people would turn right going across a bridge from the fields into the
Riverside.
Pineview area and still come up and shop at Walmart and Home Depot.
well, and that's,
And
you've
so
had, for
maybe
instance,
the idea is that it's less money to jointly work on a bridge with St. George than to
Redo that.
reconstruct our whole intersection. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, if we have to remove Zions Bank and the gas station just to have that intersection function, it's probably cheaper to participate in a bridge than.
well, and I don't know if we know that answer yet.
I could say if you could guarantee that was the case.
Are there engineers that can do traffic studies to that, or is it?
Mike's
just,
coming up, he must know something.
He's got a smile on his face.
That's part of the equation of our study of the Green Springs, is that Mall Drive will be built. We're still in that situation with Mall Drive being built.
Does
If we don't build
does the
Mall
Mall
Drive,
Drive
we're in
Bridge?
a lot worse shape than what the study showed.
Ouch.
So do you have any money in any of your funds that aren't general fund that we can? Because your funds are a lot easier than this general fund. You know that. They don't get nearly as
To put the Mall
scrutinized.
Drive.
Poor
We put in
Barry.
toll roads, we can make Telegraph a toll
Well,
road.
the issue I have with us putting money into Mall Drive is St. George didn't offer any money for our Third East, which helped their citizens.
It's true.
especially going out to the airport. This is what we do. This is why it's so frustrating to me that they never once, nor did we ask, because this is when we do regional.
Well, let's start
planning, we do
asking, and then we get some bargaining power.
Well,
Let's start asking for them to contribute for
Well, we
something
know
a
what the
little
answer,
more.
we know what the answer is. We've got an
Well, then let's call it
MPO.
even, and you do.
No. Well, we've got an MPO that deals with these combined efforts. And that's what Councilman.
Do we
and-
have something that we can come back and start bartering with, and then they'll say no and say, fine, you do yours, we'll do ours?
Well, you can always throw it out and you'll get just what he told you.
Well, but at least it's,
Well, and the fact of the matter
I
is,
mean, it sends a message, I agree with you, it kind of sends a message, hello.
Out of office
we can,
reply.
hey, you know, Councilman so-and-so, we really need some help on this.
the
We
re,
need help on this, well, let's
you know,
just do our own.
I have a philosophical feeling about Mile Drive. You all know what it is, but the reality is, I don't think it's even an option to sit in front of you. You tell me where it's gonna come from. It's not part of a capital facilities plan, and we would never put it in well, we could, but we wouldn't put it part of a capital facilities plan. We rarely put impact fees in our city that goes to other cities.
Right.
But it's not there, so there's no impact fee money. You're gonna have to choose with what little Class C money we have, if it goes that way, which road in our city you do not want to do. And then short of that, you got a bond, and when you're gonna bond, I need to know where the debt service is gonna come from. And we don't have enough Class C. So I think that a lot of the Mall Drive discussion is the simple fact, my short answer to St. George has lately been, because it just gets so wearisome, is my short answer is, where would you like us to come up with that money?
Well, we can start with pulling it from the Christmas presents to the council,
There's
and then we're on.
You were gonna put that in the new pool.
Wait a minute, Mike's got a comment on that.
You can take these T-shirts back. There's $20.
What if you gave him a T-shirt?
We got uniforms up here, Mike's gonna have us whipped into shape.
One thing you gotta keep in mind, St. George has never made a formal request.
Yeah.
They've never made a formal request asking Washington City to contribute.
And I think there's a reason.
Well, I just spent 2 hours with Gary Esplin on a formal request.
I hope you
And
don't
in
put
the
stuff-
past,
No, I didn't.
we've had verbal requests,
I
and it says,
didn't.
put it in writing, and I'll be more than happy to take it to council.
That's what I
And they
told
have
him he needs to
Never put
do.
it in writing.
Yeah, and in spite of popular demand, formal requests really ought to come from a legislative body and not the city manager.
Right.
That is not what we consider formal.
Well, they're
request.
gonna go ahead and build it, whether we participate or not. They're gonna go ahead and build it. They just wanna be able to build it 4 lanes instead of 2 lanes.
And part of that is.
And if we give them $100,000, they'd be glad to get 100. If we gave them $20, they'd be glad to get $20.
And part of that is accurate, and part of that is not accurate. They actually had funds to build that bridge, and they had to reshift those funds
They
around.
did,
as
and
part of the
they admit
airport,
that.
too.
They admit that. They
So
admit that.
again, I don't know where this becomes now our,
It's not our issue.
problem.
It's not our issue or our problem. I
But they
just,
make us
he
feel
come to me
like
and
we're-
said, can you participate, and how much could you participate if you wanted to participate? I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the bottom
What did you
line.
tell him, Mayor?
I told him, I'd talk to you gentlemen, and you make that decision. You're the legislative body.
I'm looking at the budget here. Like I said, we can sell.
We don't have them, I told him, I said, Gary,
Sell the Covington.
I said, I don't know where we're gonna give you any money, but. I just told him we could sell raffle tickets, you know, we got shotguns, we can go sell raffle tickets for shotguns.
I don't know if that's appropriate. I know what the front page said.
Yeah. But that's what I told him, so whenever they come and wanna do anything formal, then they can.
I like your idea, manager, and we need to start, I thought we tried to look at this, but I think we need inside the fields, the flat part, commercial.
Yeah, I didn't add that to my economic development letter, but I certainly think that you're getting the densities out there.
Yeah.
Maybe density's not right. You're getting the significant land, enough population. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think densities is appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting rooftops that would support it.
Well, how about the sentiment out there? I
The only areas
remember,
that we looked at for the general plan, when we updated the master plan, was basically there where the Andersons are,
Well,
and
and
they're
you're gonna
not.
be in a great position as
They have
soon
no
as.
interest to do
soon as that
anything for
road
the
goes
Well,
time
as
being.
soon as, it's really gonna be interesting, because I think you're gonna see some significant noticeable difference as soon as the Southern Parkway is connected to the airport on 300 East Washington Fields. Because you know anybody who, it's gonna be closer than going out to milepost 2, which is gonna be a good portion of St. George, is gonna flow over here and down Washington
Well,
Fields.
that was the idea on your Washington.
It is,
.org.
and so it's gonna be very noticeable. And then I think that helps us too, because that traffic starts to help us have more discussions with people about, this makes more sense economically.
I think you'll see the two chapels on Washington Field Road start to be kind of the new epicenter of.
Well, we did have one time, some of the council will remember, we had a proposal for a convenience store out there right on 2000, and it just, the neighbors there didn't like it, the council wouldn't support it at the time, but I can tell you, I know for a fact that the landowner still would have an interest in doing something.
Well, and
on
it's
that
now
area
its
as well.
own neighborhood commercial, which lets you have a market but no gasoline sales, right?
Oh, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bill, you were on that committee,
Yeah, we
right?
felt like the land wasn't large enough, that wasn't a big enough piece of property that they could, you'd have enough space for ingress and egress for lots of gasoline stuff.
And then again, completely off the subject of taxes, if you're talking about this whole issue is I can't get a bus to go somewhere, walkable communities should be of a concern to this council, meaning maybe a convenience store in the fields is important to try to help alleviate traffic to places. I mean, it all meshes together. Because if they have to always drive up here to get a soda
Right.
or a gallon of milk,
Yeah, I mean, what of our population is south of the river? I mean, I wonder if it's 40 or 50%, and there are no services on that side of the river in Washington City. No services.
yeah, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I can tell you, probably 70 to 80% of our growth in the last 5 years has all been south of the river.
Yeah.
Green Springs now is going nuts if you've gone up there. The church that you
North
used to could
Bridge.
see,
Yeah,
you can't see
it
anymore. But south of the river's been
I'll tell you, I've always envisioned that big lot of Roy Nison's right there on that corner being a commercial center.
I know, as much as we love alfalfa fields, huh?
It's a perfect commercial center. Got two busiest roads in the fields feeding it.
This is the discussion we're having. I like to have.
Well, the one straight across, the whoever Staley piece,
Yeah, on the corner.
that's a good.
Yeah, that was the one that came before the council.
I don't know how big it is, but it
Yeah,
looks like.
you'll have to redo your general plan if you get into those discussions.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's
Out there.
discussions that we're talking, yeah.
Did they talk about the Nice piece in the general plan?
I think the nice, I don't know if the nicest piece is.
We,
what that
I remember
zone
we
is.
talked about it, but we left it
Just,
residential.
See, right now, it's perfect because you've got roads separating, so you've got separation from residential, so you're not gonna
I
impact
think
them.
part of what we did with that was we took into account what the landholder
Landowner wanted.
wanted, and their
Usage.
usage was they felt like it would be best use for them would be to continue to be residential. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong.
The future landowners may have other ideas.
That's
for
why
kids.
we're allowed to make changes,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
we usually find the second generation has a completely different idea than the first generation.
Yeah, they want money.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
1621 south, how many north?
Like 60%.
I'd have to add several different things together to get that number, but south of the river, 1,620 connections,
How many total?
7,000.
Yeah, so we're still.
Well,
So
I can tell
small.
you that Lynn's Grocery Stores has had
Yeah.
a study done. Their number one site selection is right on the other side of the river.
Right there by Maverick. They
Yeah,
are,
they've got first.
They've
But
got
that's
first
still in
refusal
St.
on
George,
that
isn't it?
St.
Oh,
George.
It is St. George.
That's why they
As
would
soon
not
as
go
that-
to Walmart at that point.
as soon as
with
that mall
Lynn's right
bridge is in,
there.
they're building.
He said that's our number one site out of all of them. They've looked, he says, we've got 3 or 4 others in St. George, but that's the number one site.
I think they actually, do they have an option? They used to
See,
have.
that
They
goes
do
to
have it,
curbs.
they do have a right of first refusal on it.
Yes, they do.
So it'd be nice if someone.
Well, I
would build
told
on
him, let's
Andrews
get you
or
on across
something.
the river where you really belong.
Yeah.
But
But-
we don't have anything on the other side of the river either, because
Well-
that's St. George too.
Correct. I mean,
Yeah,
So, they,
got
they,
it all.
either way.
That's why my heart is a little bit hardened about helping them, is because I sat in a court case and listened to them say, well, we're gonna build that bridge to serve all these properties. And I say, then build it, don't come ask me for help. You took all my revenue away from me when you took my property.
Yeah.
Sorry about opening up that can of worms. Let's move on.
Mayor says one thing and it goes.
Next time Gary asks you, say, call Councilman Turek, he'll visit with you about it.
Turek and Segmiller and Hudson and Staley and Truman ought to give you plenty of input on how they.
Yeah.
How close are you? This is
I still got logs.
Any other discussion, gentlemen?
I was ready for a long meeting. What's that?
You have any other discussion, comments, questions?
I think it's been a good discussion.
Yeah, I
As
do
far as
too.
my opinion, I'm still holding to the conservative opinion of, it's not gonna be a popular opinion, but I think until we see what's happened and the economy improves and we see this building come, that it would have to forego the raises. And I hate to see the cuts in benefits, but if that's necessary as well to balance it, then that as well.
I certainly can appreciate that opinion. I personally think that it's not a bad thing to dip into our rainy day funds. That's what they're there for, and I would support the budget as it's shown. Personally, giving those raises out, those employees, if they have worked hard, I mean, I think it is important to show them some appreciation other than just saying thank you. You can tell me thank you all you want. I always say, show me how much you appreciate, don't tell me. And so,
Yeah, I think that's showing in their benefit package and everything else compared to the private
well,
sector.
they're taking a little cut on their benefit package, and that's why I say, if we're gonna give them a little cut here, let's give them a raise to go with it. I mean, if you wanted to keep the benefit package whole at 90-10, I'd say, okay, I'm willing to keep it whole and forego raises, if that's where they would rather go with their money.
I think that,
And I think it all depends on, I look at that and say it depends on if I'm healthy, I probably wanna go 80-20, and take the raise. If I'm using the insurance package, I wanna stay 90-10, and so you're probably gonna be split depending on usage there. You know, I look at staff, they spend a ton of time on these budgets, the department heads, and I personally support what's on there.
Roger, do we have any more spots we could put billboards?
I'm sorry?
Do we have any more property on which we can do billboard leases?
Um,
I'm serious, we've got all sorts of I-15 frontage and we own quite a bit of it.
well, yeah, I don't,
And those leases just have 6-year escalations built into them. I mean, there's no better.
I don't know the answer.
Probably
we
the power
could-
yard when you move it.
We could look, yeah, I don't know the answer right off on that.
I'm being serious, I think that's something we should look into. I know people.
Yeah, the
like
power
that.
yard, we'll have to look at that, because we got the proposed frontage road going through there, so whatever we do, we'd have to make sure we were within an acceptable right of way
We could
there.
figure that
And
out.
then, do we have a billboard already on the radio tower property? Or do we not? We just have the radio tower? We do have a billboard already on that one? Okay, so we got one there.
That's where our billboard's at, correct? The one that,
No.
for the
I'm
city?
talking about the radio tower further down toward Main Street. That's our piece of property too. It's not huge, but it's right in front of those little.
Yeah, on the far,
Right in front of
east
Warm
end
Springs
of the
area.
property there.
Is
We have
our
the
billboard even on our property?
It is,
Okay,
because when we built
Okay.
that frontage road, we actually had to move that
When you say
billboard
our
off.
billboard, you mean the one that has the community center ad?
No, the one that has
The Green Spring.
the Green Springs Golf Course and that we have a joint ownership with the old Redlands group.
Okay.
So, do we own the one that has this community center stuff on it?
I don't know if we do. That's the backside. Oh, that's the backside.
Backside.
So it's the same one?
Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember where that one was.
Would it, do we
Shares
get,
it with the golf course, right? You got golf
Yeah.
and community
So,
center sharing.
your spacing that you just approved may not allow for us to put any more in.
I think it
We
probably
approve
does.
that.
I think it probably does.
Because the only place we'd have it, if we have one on the radio tower right now, we have one already on our other piece, that takes out our two pieces along that side north, I'm sorry, on the
We could
northbound
probably fit
direction
one more
of
down
Main
towards the
Street.
boilers a little closer.
We've got the two on the
Pieces.
boilers section. And then the only place I can think of that's on I-15 that we still have would be just that, the yard. Mhm.
Are the billboards that we're currently using for the community center in Green Springs, if we didn't use those, would those be leased out and be a revenue source?
We could, yeah, we could. Well, I don't know the answer to that, because we do share one of them with Redlands.
Well,
And
it's
so
one-
Redlands,
The one side is done in a contract with Redlands way back, we'd have to look at that.
Yeah.
The other side, you can do whatever you want with
yeah,
it.
it's ours, but.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, if you see, one of my proposals is that I would actually like to do something completely different with that, at least one side of the billboards, and that is an economic development tagline. And why I suggest that is just to talk about some of the success that Sandy had when they advertised, and it was huge for them. And that is, Sandy was the other downtown. And to encourage people as to why you should look at Washington City for economic development, just like they. And I'm gonna suggest if we
From the
keep the
billboard?
billboard, yes. And if we keep the billboard, I'm gonna suggest that we go that direction and talk to people about why they ought to do business in Washington City.
The city billboards I see up and down Interstate 15 all seem like a waste of money to me. They're too busy. I'm thinking ours, I'm thinking Tokerville's, and so we need to be a little better at utilizing billboard space, if that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, the problem, you know, it's really been frustrating because we've had great designs, and Barry will tell you this. We've had, we think, great designs. Actually, they've been more visual than they have been writing. And then when they get put up on the billboard, they just don't translate well.
Visual doesn't work on billboards.
They really don't work well for us, and
Unless
that's our
it's-
fault.
Unless it's
That's our
Councilman Truman's
mistake.
face.
We, we have, they just didn't translate well, so I agree with
I think
you.
we gotta
I
go
mean,
digital.
it just, and I don't